My daughter-in-law broke into my apartment repeatedly, 24 times in just 2 months. I asked her to stop. She laughed and said, "You are overreacting, old man." So I moved out quietly. A week later, the alarm went off at 2 in the morning. That was when everything changed. I am Langston Barnes, 69 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have lived like a ghost in my own life. To my neighbors in this quiet Chicago suburb, I am just a retired widower who spends too much time staring out the window. To my son Tyrell, I am an ATM that occasionally malfunctions. And to his wife Stephanie, I am nothing more than an obstacle between her and an inheritance she believes she deserves right now. But what none of them know is that before I retired, I did not fix toasters or drive a bus. I designed security protocols for defense contractors. I built digital fortresses that foreign governments could not breach. And tonight at 11:14, I am watching my own fortress being breached by a woman wearing fuzzy slippers and a look of absolute entitlement. I sat in the dark corner of my living room, the leather of my armchair cool against my back. The only light came from the street lamps filtering through the blinds, casting long prison bar shadows across the floor. My eyes were fixed on the digital clock on the VCR, 11:14, right on schedule. I heard the distinct click of the front door lock turning. It was not picked, it was opened with a key. The key I had given my son Tyrell 3 years ago after my wife Viola passed away just in case of an emergency. Tyrell had sworn to keep it safe. Instead, he had given it to the wolf he married. The door swung open with a creak I had intentionally left unoiled. Stephanie stepped inside. She did not tiptoe. She did not whisper. She walked in with the heavy, confident steps of someone entering a space she already owned. She flipped on the hallway light, blinding me for a second, but I did not move. I watched as she marched straight past the living room and into the kitchen. I heard the cabinet doors slamming. She was looking for something specific. Again. I stood up slowly, my knees popping in the silence. I walked to the kitchen doorway. She had her back to me, rummaging through the medicine cabinet above the sink, pushing aside my blood pressure medication and Viola's old herbal teas. "What are you looking for, Stephanie?" I asked. My voice was low, steady, the voice I used to use when debriefing agents who had compromised a mission. She jumped, dropping a bottle of aspirin into the sink. It rattled loudly against the ceramic. She spun around, clutching her chest, but there was no fear in her eyes, only annoyance. "Jesus, Langston," she snapped, rolling her eyes. "You scared me to death. Why are you sitting in the dark like a creep?" I ignored her insult. "I asked you a question. It is almost midnight." "Why are you in my house?" she scoffed, turning back to the cabinet as if my presence were a minor inconvenience. "I had a headache. Tyrell and I ran out of ibuprofen. I knew you had some. God, do not make it a federal case." I stepped closer. This was a lie. She lived 20 minutes away. There was a 24-hour pharmacy 2 blocks from her house. She was not here for ibuprofen. She was here because she was hunting. For 2 months, my hidden cameras had recorded her rifling through my desk, tapping on the walls, looking under the rugs. She was looking for the money she was convinced I had hidden. She was looking for the deed to the house. "This is the 24th time you have entered my home without permission in 60 days, I said, keeping my distance. "I have the logs." Stephanie laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound that grated on my nerves. "Logs. You really are losing it, aren't you? Sitting here counting how many times family comes to visit. You should be grateful we even check on you. Most old men in your position rot for weeks before anyone notices the smell." The cruelty of her words was precise, designed to hurt, to make me feel small and dependent. But I felt nothing. The part of me that used to care about her, the part that had welcomed her into the family 5 years ago, hoping she would be good for Tyrell, that part had died a long time ago. "I want my key back," I said, extending my hand. Stephanie stared at my open palm. Her expression shifted from annoyance to pure malice. She slammed the cabinet door shut. "No. Excuse me, I said no," she repeated, stepping into my personal space. She smelled of stale cigarettes and expensive perfume, a combination that made me nauseous. "Tyrell gave me this key. This is family property. And let's be honest, Langston, look at you. You are old. You are alone. This apartment, it is way too big for you. It is practically ours already. We are just waiting for nature to take its course, so I come and go as I please." Her words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She was not just claiming the key. She was claiming my life. She was telling me that I was already dead to them, just a squatter in their future inheritance. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the greed in her eyes, the absolute lack of respect. And I realized that no conversation, no plea for boundaries, no angry outburst would ever change her. She did not see a father-in-law. She saw a pay stub. "I am asking you one last time, Stephanie," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Leave the key on the counter and get out," she sneered. "Or what? You will call the police on your own son's wife. Go ahead. Tell them I came to check on my poor confused father-in-law and he got aggressive. Who do you think they will believe? The young woman or the angry old black man who sits in the dark?" She grabbed a framed photo from the counter. It was a picture of Viola and me on our 40th anniversary. We were laughing, holding hands on a beach in Jamaica. It was my favorite photo. Stephanie looked at it with disdain. "Tacky," she muttered. She tossed it onto the tile floor. The glass shattered. The sound was like a gunshot in the small kitchen. A shard of glass sliced across Viola's smiling face. Stephanie looked down at the broken frame, then back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oops. Clumsy me. I guess you should have taken the key when I offered. Huh. Now look what you made me do." She kicked a piece of glass toward me. "Keep your aspirin, old man. I will just buy some. You are too cheap to have the good stuff anyway." She brushed past me, her shoulder checking mine hard enough to make me stumble. She walked down the hallway humming to herself. I heard the front door open and slam shut. The lock did not turn. She still had the key. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I did not look at the broken glass. I looked at the empty space where my wife's smile used to be. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. A cold, familiar calm settled over me. It was the same calm I used to feel in the Situation Room when a threat level went from orange to red. The time for diplomacy was over. The enemy was inside the perimeter. I walked to the living room and picked up the phone. It looked like a standard landline, dusty and old-fashioned. But when I dialed a specific sequence of numbers, the line did not ring. It clicked once, then a secure channel opened. "This is Agent Barnes, retired," I said. "ID number 47 Alpha 9. There was a pause, then a computerized voice responded. Voice print confirmed. "Welcome back, Director. I need a cleanup crew," I said. "Level 4 extraction. I am initiating the Omega Protocol. Is the asset compromised?" the voice asked. "The location is compromised," I replied. "The asset is relocating. Sunrise execution. Understood. Team is deploying. ETA 4 hours. I hung up the phone. I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 30 years. The beige wallpaper Viola had picked out. The scratches on the floorboards from when Tyrell learned to walk. The stain on the ceiling from a leak we fixed together one rainy Sunday. It was all just wood and plaster now. The memories were in my head. The safety was gone. I did not go to sleep. I went to the bedroom and pulled a small battered suitcase from under the bed. I did not pack clothes. I did not pack toiletries. I walked to the electrical outlet behind the nightstand. I used a small screwdriver to remove the faceplate. Behind the wiring deep in the wall cavity was a small black box with a blinking green light. This was not a fuse box. It was a server node, one of 3 I had installed in the apartment. It held encrypted backups of consulting work I still did for private firms, work that paid me $50,000 a month. Money Tyrell and Stephanie assumed came from a meager pension. I disconnected the drive and placed it in a lined pouch in my suitcase. I moved to the living room and did the same with the hidden safe behind the vent, retrieving a stack of bearer bonds and a hard drive containing the digital keys to my offshore accounts. At 4 a.m, a black van pulled up to the service entrance of the building. 3 men and 2 women got out. They wore gray coveralls with no logos. They moved with silent efficiency. They did not knock. I opened the door before they reached it. "Good to see you, sir," the team leader said. He was a man I had trained 10 years ago. "You too, Miller," I said. "Strip it, leave the furniture, leave the clothes, take the tech." They went to work. They did not move sofas or tables. They moved walls. They extracted fiber optic cables I had run through the baseboards. They removed the high-resolution cameras hidden in the smoke detectors. They swept the room for any digital footprint I might have left behind. Within an hour, my apartment was no longer a fortress. It was just a sad old apartment filled with sad old furniture. Before we left, I did one last thing. I pulled up the corner of the rug in the hallway. I installed a pressure sensor pad thin as a sheet of paper directly in front of the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Then I replaced the smoke detector in the living room with a standard-looking unit. But this one was not a smoke detector. It was a high-output motion sensor linked to a silent alarm system that bypassed the local police and went straight to a federal monitoring station. I did not change the locks on the front door. That was the most important part of the trap. If I changed the locks, she would just break a window. I wanted her to use her key. I wanted her to feel welcome. By 6 in the morning, I was standing in the empty living room. My suitcase was by the door. The team had already left. The apartment looked exactly as it had the night before, minus the invisible layer of protection I had lived within. It looked vulnerable. It looked like an easy target. My phone rang. It was Tyrell. I stared at the screen. My son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The man who had stood at his mother's grave and promised to look after me. I answered. Dad Tyrell's voice was thick with sleep, but there was an edge to it. Stephanie told me what happened last night. Is that so? I asked. Yeah. She said she went over there to bring you some soup because she thought you sounded sick on the phone earlier and you started yelling at her. She said you threw a picture frame at her dad. She came home crying. She's terrified of you. The lie was so bold, so completely reversed from reality, that I almost admired the audacity. She had turned herself into the victim before the sun even came up. She is lying, Tyrell, I said simply. Do not call my wife a liar, he snapped. His voice grew louder. You are getting worse, Dad. We have been trying to ignore it, but you are becoming aggressive, paranoid. Maybe Stephanie is right. Maybe you can't live alone anymore. I closed my eyes. This was the script. They had rehearsed this. Create an incident, blame my mental state, force me out. You know what, Tyrell, I said, opening my eyes? You are right. The silence on the other end was stunned. What I said, you are right, I repeated. I am old. I am tired. I should not be living here alone. I have been a burden to you two for too long. Tyrell's tone changed instantly. It went from angry to patronizingly sweet. Dad, we just want you to be safe. We can help you. We can manage the house, the bills. You just need to rest. I understand, I said. I am sorry, I yelled. Tell Stephanie I am sorry. I will not bother you two anymore. Tyrell let out a breath he must have been holding. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. We will come over this weekend. Okay? We can talk about the next steps. Maybe look at some assisted living places. They are really nice. Like hotels. Sure, son, I said. Like hotels. Goodbye, Tyrell. I hung up. He thought he had won. He thought I had just surrendered. He had no idea that when I said I would not bother them anymore, I meant I was removing myself from the equation entirely. I picked up my suitcase and the broken photo of Viola. I walked out of the apartment and closed the door. I did not lock the deadbolt. I left it just secure enough to look normal, but accessible enough for a key. I took the elevator down to the garage, but I did not walk to my 10-year-old sedan, the car I drove to maintain my cover. I walked past it to the reserved corner spot that had been covered with a tarp for months. I pulled the tarp off to reveal a matte black SUV with reinforced glass and run-flat tires. I threw my bag in the back seat. As I drove out of the garage, I watched my building fade in the rearview mirror. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was fleeting. The Langston Barnes who lived there, the vulnerable old man, was gone. I drove across the city, heading toward the skyline. I pulled into the underground parking of the Meridian Tower, a building where the penthouse cost $4.5 million. I did not need a mortgage. I had bought it cash 3 years ago through a shell company just in case. I took the private elevator to the 45th floor. The doors opened into a space of glass and steel filled with morning light. It was cold, modern, and impregnable. I set my suitcase down and walked to the wall of monitors in the study. I typed a command on the keyboard. 6 screens flickered to life. They showed the interior of my old apartment in high-definition infrared. I could see the hallway, the kitchen, the living room. I could see the broken glass still on the floor. I poured myself a glass of vintage scotch, sat back in the ergonomic chair, and waited. I knew they wouldn't wait for the weekend. Tyrell was in debt. Stephanie was greedy. They thought they had broken me. They would come to collect their prize. The trap was set. The cheese was in the maze. Now I just had to wait for the rats. And I did not have to wait long. At 4 in the morning, the world was silent, but I was wide awake. The streetlights outside cast long orange shadows across the floorboards of the apartment that had been my cover for so long. I stood by the window watching the street. A black van with no license plates rolled to a stop at the curb. It did not idle. The engine cut immediately. The side door slid open and 4 figures stepped out into the chill of the pre-dawn air. They were dressed in matte gray coveralls and carried reinforced polymer cases. They moved with a fluidity that you do not learn in a moving company. You learn it in special operations. I unlocked the door before they even knocked. The team leader was a man named Miller. I had recruited him out of the SEALs 15 years ago. He did not smile. He did not ask how I was doing. He simply nodded and signaled his team to enter. They did not look at the worn beige sofa or the dusty bookshelf filled with paperback novels. They knew those were just props. They went straight to the infrastructure. Miller knelt by the electrical outlet behind the television stand. He used a specialized torque tool to remove the faceplate in seconds. Behind the standard household wiring was a false wall cavity lined with lead to prevent thermal scanning. He reached in and pulled out a server node the size of a paperback book. It blinked with a soft blue light. This drive contained terabytes of encrypted data on ballistic missile defense protocols that I still consulted on. To Tyrell and Stephanie, I was just an old man watching game shows. In reality, I was maintaining the firewall for the eastern seaboard. Miller placed the drive into a Faraday bag and locked it in a steel case. The other team members were dismantling the baseboards in the hallway. They pulled up long strands of fiber optic cable that I had run parallel to the copper phone lines. They worked in total silence. There was no clanging of tools, no whispered instructions. They were ghosts dismantling a haunted house. I watched them remove the biometric safe hidden behind the HVAC return vent. It held bearer bonds and emergency currency from 3 different countries. They did not touch the decoy safe in the closet, the one containing expired insurance papers and a few $100s in cash. That was for the thieves. That was for Stephanie. By 4:45, the apartment had been surgically lobotomized. The brain was gone. The nervous system was gone. All that remained was the husk. The furniture looked even sadder now. The empty spaces on the walls where the sensors had been looked like scars. Miller stopped at the door. He handed me a secure satellite phone and a new identity packet. "The asset is secure," he said. His voice was gravel. "We will have the new location online by 0800. "Good work, Miller," I said. "Leave the truck. Take the van." He nodded once and vanished into the hallway with his team. I was alone again. The apartment felt different now. It felt dead. It was no longer a fortress. It was just a trap waiting to be sprung. I walked to the center of the living room. It was time for the final touches. I opened the small black case I had kept for myself. Inside were 4 devices that looked like standard household items but cost more than Tyrell made in a year. I started with the rug in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I rolled it back carefully. I took out a pressure sensor mat. It was thin as a sheet of paper and flexible as fabric. It was military grade, designed to differentiate between the weight of a household pet and a human intruder. I laid it flat against the hardwood floor and smoothed the rug back over it. It was completely invisible. Anyone stepping on this rug would not feel a thing, but the signal it sent would be instantaneous. It would log the time, the weight, and the duration of the step. It would tell me exactly when the rats entered the maze. Next, I went to the smoke detector on the ceiling of the living room. I twisted the old plastic cover off. It was yellowed with age. I replaced the internal battery with a high-capacity lithium cell and inserted a micro-camera lens into the sensor gap. It was a wide-angle infrared camera capable of capturing high-definition video in total darkness. I snapped the cover back on. It looked like a $20 piece of junk from the hardware store. In reality, it was a direct feed to my secure server. I moved to the kitchen. I placed a similar audio bug behind the refrigerator. I wanted to hear them. I wanted to hear their excitement when they thought they had won and their panic when they realized they had lost. I wanted every word recorded for the lawyers and the police. Finally, I went to the front door. I stared at the deadbolt. It was a standard grade 2 lock. I could have replaced it with a biometric scanner or a magnetic mag lock. I could have made this apartment impenetrable, but that would defeat the purpose. A fortress keeps enemies out. A prison keeps them in. I needed this to be a prison. I took the key Tyrell had given Stephanie. I looked at it one last time. It was a simple piece of brass. It was the symbol of my trust and their betrayal. I put it in my pocket. I did not change the lock. I did not add a chain. I left it exactly as it was. I wanted her to use her key. I wanted her to feel the slide of the metal, the click of the tumbler. I wanted her to feel the rush of power as she opened the door to a home she thought she had conquered. Leaving the lock unchanged was the most dangerous weapon I had. It was an invitation. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. I picked up my single suitcase. I looked around the room. The sun was just starting to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. The apartment was ready. It was a stage set for a tragedy, and the actors were already rehearsing their lines. My phone rang. The screen lit up. It was Tyrell. It was 8 in the morning. Tyrell was never awake at 8 in the morning. He usually slept until noon, recovering from late nights of gambling or drinking. The fact that he was calling now meant Stephanie had been working on him all night. She had been pouring poison in his ear, twisting the narrative, making herself the victim. I let it ring twice before answering. I needed to sound tired. I needed to sound defeated. "Hello," I said. My voice was a rasp. Dad Tyrell's voice was loud, too loud. It was the voice of a man trying to convince himself he was righteous. "We need to talk about last night." I sat down on the arm of the sofa. I looked at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of morning light. "I am listening, Tyrell." "Stephanie is a mess, Dad. She has been crying for hours. She said she went over there to check on you because she was worried about your heart and you attacked her. She said you were screaming like a lunatic. She said you threw Mom's picture at her. The lie was so predictable it was almost boring. She had taken the truth and inverted it perfectly." I looked at the shattered glass of Viola's photo still lying in the kitchen where Stephanie had kicked it. "Is that what she said?" I asked calmly. "Yes, that is what she said. And I believe her." "You have been acting strange for months, Dad. You are paranoid. You are aggressive. We cannot keep doing this. We cannot keep walking on eggshells around you in your own house." I closed my eyes. He was lecturing me. The son whose debts I had secretly paid for years. The son whose car insurance I covered because he had too many DUIs. He was lecturing me about behavior. "You are right, Tyrell," I said. The line went silent for a moment. He had expected a fight. He had prepared a list of arguments, and I had just kicked the legs out from under him. "I am what he asked, confused." "You are right," I repeated. "I have been difficult. I am old Tyrell. I am confused. I get angry about small things. Maybe I am losing it. Maybe the house is too much for me." I could hear him breathing on the other end. I could hear the shift in his demeanor. He covered the phone for a second, and I heard him whisper something to Stephanie. He came back on the line, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Dad, look, we are not trying to be mean. We just want you to be safe. We are your family. We are the only ones who care about you. If you can admit that you need help, that is the first step." "I need help," I said. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. "I have been a burden to you both. I see that now. I do not want to be a burden anymore." "You are not a burden." Dad Tyrell lied. "We just think maybe it is time for a change. Time for you to rest. We can handle the heavy lifting. We can manage the apartment." I gripped the phone tight. My knuckles turned white. He was already moving in. He was already measuring the curtains. "I understand, son," I said. "I am going to go away for a while." "Go away?" "What do you mean?" Tyrell asked sharp. "Just for a few days. I need to clear my head. I need to think about what you said, about assisted living, about handing things over." Excitement leaked into his voice. "That sounds like a good idea, Dad. Really good. Where are you going?" "Just a motel nearby." I lied. "Do not worry about me. I will be fine. I just need you to know one thing, Tyrell." "What is it, Dad? I will not be a burden anymore. I promise you that. This is the last time I will ever cause you trouble." "Thanks, Dad," Tyrell said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I could hear the victory. He thought I was surrendering. He thought I was handing him the keys to the kingdom. "We love you, Dad. We just want what is best for you." "I know," I said. "Goodbye, Tyrell." I hung up the phone. I stared at the black screen. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was retreating to a cheap motel to cry and wait for him to come save me. He had no idea that when I said I would not be a burden, I meant I was cutting the cord. I was removing the safety net. I stood up and walked to the door. I did not look back. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut. The latch clicked. It was the sound of a weapon being cocked. I walked down the hall to the elevator. My steps were light. The heavy weight of obligation, the years of trying to save a son who did not want to be saved, was gone. I was not a father anymore. I was an operator. and the mission had just begun. I took the service elevator to the basement garage. I bypassed my old sedan and went straight to the corner where my extraction vehicle waited. I threw my bag in the back and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life. As I drove out of the garage and into the morning traffic, I checked my watch. 8:15. Tyrell would call Stephanie now. They would celebrate. They would make plans. They would think they had the weekend to prepare. But they were greedy. Greed makes people impatient. They would not wait for the weekend. They would not wait for me to come back. They would come tonight. I drove toward the city, toward my new life, toward the monitors that would show me the end of theirs. The ghost had left the building. Now the haunt began. 2:14 in the morning. The witching hour for thieves and liars. I sat in the ergonomically sculpted leather chair of my study on the 45th floor of the Meridian Tower. The city lights of Chicago sprawled out beneath me like a circuit board of gold and amber. It was a view that cost $4.5 million. In my hand, I held a crystal glass filled with a heavy pour of Screaming Eagle Cabernet. $500 a bottle. It tasted like oak and victory. The room was silent except for the low hum of the server banks cooling in the wall. In front of me, a bank of 6 high-definition monitors glowed with a cold blue light. They displayed the interior of my old apartment, the one I had abandoned 18 hours ago. The feed was crisp, delivered via the encrypted military-grade connection I had installed myself. The infrared cameras turned the darkness into a grainy green stage. I watched the timestamp in the corner of the center screen tick forward. 2:14 and 30 seconds. A shadow moved across the external camera feed. It was not alone. There were 2 figures. One was small and moved with the jerky entitlement I knew too well, Stephanie. The other was larger, hulking, and moved with the twitchy agitation of a chemical dependent. That would be Mike, her older brother. Tyrell had told me Mike was in rehab. Tyrell lied about everything. They did not pick the lock. Stephanie used the key. I watched on the monitor as she slid the brass into the cylinder. She turned it with a confidence that made my stomach turn. She pushed the door open. The pressure sensor under the hallway rug spiked red on my dashboard. The system logged the intrusion. Weight 140 pounds. Weight 210 pounds. The rats were in the maze. I took a slow sip of the wine. It was smooth. On the screen, Stephanie flipped the light switch, but I had cut the main breaker before I left. The apartment remained in darkness. "Damn it, old man," she hissed. The audio pickup behind the fridge was sensitive enough to catch the fabric of her jacket rustling. He cut the power. "Mike, turn on your flashlight." A beam of harsh white light cut through the grain of the video feed. It swept across the empty living room, illuminating the dust motes and the sad beige furniture I had left behind. "Where is it?" Mike growled. "You said the old man had a safe. You said he had cash." "He does." Stephanie insisted. "He hides it. He is paranoid. Check the bedroom closet. Check behind the paintings." I watched them move deeper into the apartment. They did not take off their shoes. They tracked mud across the floor where Viola used to dance in her socks. I felt a cold spike of anger, but I pushed it down. Emotion was a liability. This was an operation. They tore the apartment apart. It was not a search. It was a demolition. Mike went into the bedroom. I watched him on the bedroom camera. He pulled the mattress off the frame and flipped it over. He took a knife from his belt and sliced open the fabric, looking for hollow spaces. Feathers and foam exploded into the air. He ripped the drawers out of the dresser, dumping my old sweaters and socks onto the floor. He stomped on them. Stephanie was in the living room. She was pulling books off the shelves, shaking them, hoping money would fall out. When nothing did, she threw the books against the wall. She grabbed the ceramic vase Viola had made in a pottery class 20 years ago. She smashed it on the floor. "Where is the gold?" Stephanie Mike yelled from the bedroom. "There is nothing here but old man clothes and dust." "Keep looking," she screamed back. Her voice was shrill, rising in panic. "He has money, Mike. He pays Tyrell's debts. He has to have a stash. Check the vents." Mike walked into the living room. He looked at the wall where the television used to be. I had taken the TV but left the mount. He grabbed the mount and ripped it from the drywall, leaving a gaping hole. He punched the wall between the studs. Drywall crumbled. "This is a waste of time," he spat. "I need a fix, Steph. You promised me $5,000. "We will find it," she said, desperate. She ran to the kitchen. She started sweeping the counters clear with her arm. My plates, my cups, the coffee mug Tyrell gave me for Father's Day 10 years ago all crashed to the floor. She opened the refrigerator and started throwing food containers over her shoulder. I sat in my penthouse watching the destruction of my past. They were erasing every trace of the life I had lived there, and in doing so, they were freeing me. They were proving that nothing in that apartment deserved to be saved except the memories in my head. Stephanie fell to her knees in the middle of the kitchen trash. She was sobbing now, but it was not sadness. It was the rage of a predator denied a meal. "Where is it?" she screamed at the ceiling. "Where did you hide it, you senile old bat?" She crawled over to the pantry door and ripped it open. She found the decoy safe. It was a small fireproof box I had bought at an office supply store. I found it, she yelled. "Mike, get the crowbar." Mike ran in. He jammed a pry bar into the seam of the box. He grunted, straining against the metal. It popped open with a snap. Stephanie reached in. She pulled out a stack of papers. Expired car insurance policies, old tax returns from 1998, and a single $20 bill I had left taped to the bottom. $20. Mike stared at the bill. "You brought me here for $20. He threw the box at her. It hit her in the shoulder. She screamed. He moved it. She wailed. He knew. The bastard knew. I set my wine glass down on the coaster. The show was over. It was time for the curtain call. I reached for the iPad propped up next to the monitors. The screen displayed a control panel for the apartment's security grid. It was not a standard alarm interface. It was a custom GUI I had designed myself, connected to a hardline server I still maintained clearance for. I looked at the two figures on the screen. They were standing in the ruins of my kitchen, arguing. Mike was raising his hand to strike her. Stephanie was cowering. They were disgusting. They were criminals, and they were trespassing on federal property. Technically, the apartment was still my private residence. But the server node I had removed, the one that held the defense protocols, was classified top secret. I had filed a digital marker on the property listing it as a remote secure storage facility for sensitive government data. It was a designation usually reserved for safe houses and black sites. Breaking into my home was burglary. Breaking into a secure storage facility was an act of domestic terrorism. I tapped the command labeled lockdown. In the old apartment, a series of heavy thuds echoed through the walls. These were not normal locks. These were magnetic steel bolts installed inside the door frames, drilled deep into the structural concrete. They slammed home with the force of a hydraulic press. The front door was now sealed. The back door was sealed. The windows, which were reinforced with invisible security film, locked into their frames. On the monitor, I saw Mike freeze. He looked toward the hallway. "What was that?" he asked. Stephanie looked around. "I do not know. Let us get out of here." They ran to the front door. Mike grabbed the handle. It would not turn. He threw his shoulder against the wood. It was like hitting a solid wall. He kicked it. The door did not even shudder. "It is stuck," he yelled. Stephanie tried the window. She unlatched it, but it refused to slide up. She picked up a heavy candlestick and swung it at the glass. It bounced off with a dull thud, leaving not even a scratch. "What is happening?" she screamed. I tapped the second command on my iPad. "Silent alarm. Level 1 breach." I did not call 911. I did not call the local precinct where Tyrell had friends from high school. The signal went to a dedicated server in Virginia. It flagged a critical compromise of a Five Eyes asset location. It bypassed the local dispatch and went straight to the nearest federal tactical response team. The response time for a level 1 breach is less than 8 minutes. I watched the timer on my screen count down. Mike was hitting the door with the crowbar now. Sparks flew, but the steel core of the door held firm. Stephanie was crying, curled up in the corner of the hallway. "Open the door," she shrieked. "Dad, open the door." I leaned into the microphone on my desk. I pressed the button that activated the hidden speakers in the apartment smoke detectors. My voice came out distorted, metallic, and terrifyingly loud in the small space. "This facility is in lockdown," I said. "Authorities have been notified. Remain on the ground with your hands visible." Stephanie looked up at the ceiling, her eyes wide with terror. "Langston, is that you? Let us out. You are trespassing in a restricted zone." The voice continued, ignoring her. "Negotiation is not an option." 6 minutes passed. I saw the lights before they heard them. No sirens. Just the silent approach of 2 armored personnel carriers pulling up to the curb downstairs. Men in full tactical gear spilled out. They did not walk. They swarmed. They carried battering rams and assault rifles. They wore night vision goggles. They reached the hallway. I saw them on the external camera. They did not knock. They attached a shaped charge to the hinges of the front door. Inside, Mike was still hitting the lock. Stephanie was screaming my name. Boom! The door imploded. Smoke filled the hallway. A flashbang grenade rolled across the floor and detonated with a blinding white light that washed out the camera feed for 3 seconds. When the image returned, Mike was face down on the floor, his hands zip-tied behind his back. A boot was on his neck. Stephanie was being thrown against the wall. "Get down! Get down!" a voice roared over the audio feed. "I live here!" Stephanie screamed. "This is my father-in-law's house. I have a key." "Secure the asset," a tactical officer shouted. "Clear the room." 2 officers grabbed Stephanie. She kicked and thrashed. "This is a mistake. Call Langston. He is crazy. He set us up. Subject 1 secure, subject 2 secure, an officer reported. No sensitive data found on subjects. Room is compromised." One of the team leaders, a man whose face was covered by a ballistic mask, leaned close to Stephanie. His voice was cold professional. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for breaking and entering a federal secure facility and attempted espionage. You have the right to remain silent." "Espionage?" Stephanie wailed as they dragged her out the door. "I was looking for ibuprofen." I watched as they were hauled away. The apartment was destroyed. The door was blown off the hinges. The furniture was wrecked. It was a disaster area. I closed the iPad. I finished my wine. The vintage was excellent. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Tyrell would be getting a phone call soon, and he would realize that the game we were playing had no rules anymore. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out at the city sleeping below me. Somewhere down there in a holding cell, my daughter-in-law was trying to explain why she had raided a national security asset with a crowbar. "Good luck with that, Stephanie," I whispered to the glass. I turned off the monitors. It was time to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. 4 in the morning is the hour when the city finally holds its breath, but my phone shattered that silence with a violence that vibrated through the glass of my coffee table. It was Tyrell. I had been expecting this call since the tactical team breached my old apartment 2 hours ago. I picked up the phone and pressed the speaker button. I did not say a word. I just listened to the heavy, panicked breathing on the other end. "Dad, are you there? Answer me, damn it!" Tyrell's voice was high-pitched and cracking. He sounded like a child who had woken up from a nightmare only to find the monster was real. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath. "Hello, Tyrell. Do you know what time it is?" "I do not care what time it is," he screamed. "You have to get down here right now. I am at the federal holding facility downtown. They have Stephanie. They arrested her dad. They raided the apartment like it was a terrorist cell. They have her in handcuffs." I took a sip of water. My throat was dry from the wine, but my mind was crystal clear. "Why would they arrest Stephanie?" I asked calmly. "Was she doing something illegal?" "Stop playing games," he yelled. His voice echoed against the hard surfaces of the police station waiting room. "You set her up. You put some kind of alarm in the house." The officer said she broke into a secure federal facility. "They are talking about espionage charges, Dad." "Espionage?" "She was just looking for headache medicine. You have to come down here and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them she is family. Tell them she has a key." I could hear the desperation clawing at his throat. He was terrified, not just for his wife, but for himself. If Stephanie was locked up, he was exposed. He needed me to be the savior I had always been. He needed me to fix it. "She does not have a key, Tyrell," I said. "Yes, she does," he insisted. "I gave it to her. You know I gave it to her. Just come down here and sign the release forms." They set bail at $50,000. "We do not have that kind of money. You have to pay it. You did this, so you have to fix it." The entitlement was breathtaking. Even in the face of federal charges, he still believed my bank account was his emergency fund. He still believed I was the old man who would grumble and complain but eventually write the check. He did not realize that man had vacated the premises. "I am not coming down there, Tyrell," I said, "and I am not paying a dime." "What?" He stammered. "You have to. She is your daughter-in-law. She is a woman who broke into a secure location with a crowbar and an accomplice." I corrected him. "That is a felony." "It is your apartment," he shrieked. "It is your house. You can drop the charges." I let the silence hang there for 5 seconds. I wanted him to feel the weight of it. I wanted him to wonder why I was so calm, why I was not rushing to put on my shoes. "That is where you are confused, son," I said softly. "What are you talking about?" "I moved out yesterday, Tyrell." The line went dead silent. I could hear the background noise of the police station, the murmuring of officers, the ringing of phones, but Tyrell did not make a sound. "You moved out," he whispered finally. "Yes," I said. I told you I would not be a burden anymore. I meant it. I vacated the property at noon yesterday. I transferred the title of the unit to a holding corporation for secure data storage. It is not my home anymore. It is a commercial facility. When Stephanie kicked that door in, she did not break into my house. She broke into a corporate server farm. No. Tyrell gasped. No, you are lying. You were there. She saw your furniture. She saw props, I said. I left the junk behind because I did not need it, just like I do not need the aggravation of you two anymore. Dad, you cannot do this, he pleaded. If you do not help us, she is going to prison. They are talking about 10 years. Then she should have thought about that before she took a crowbar to a federal asset, I said. And Tyrell, do not call me again. I am changing my number today. Dad, wait. I hung up the phone. I did not just hang up. I opened the settings menu on my secure device and blocked his number. Then I routed all calls from his known associates to a dead voicemail box. I was done listening. I stood up and walked to the large mahogany desk in the center of the penthouse study. On the surface sat a thick manila folder that my private investigator had delivered 3 days ago. I had read it once, but now I needed to study it. I needed to understand exactly why they had been so desperate tonight. Stephanie was greedy, yes, but breaking in with a crowbar at 2 a.m. was an act of desperation, not just avarice. I flipped open the dossier. The first photograph was of Tyrell standing outside a dingy warehouse in the industrial district. He was talking to a man I recognized from my days in intelligence. The man's name was Carver. He was not a banker. He was a loan shark who specialized in high-interest debt for degenerate gamblers. I turned the page. There was a photocopy of a document. It was a promissory note. The amount was $150,000. The date was 6 months ago. The interest rate was predatory, compounding weekly. Tyrell had not borrowed this money for a business investment or a mortgage. The next page showed his betting history on offshore crypto gambling sites. He had lost it all, every cent. But it was the signature at the bottom of the loan agreement that made my blood run cold. It was my name, Langston Barnes. It was a forgery, but a good one. He had practiced. He had traced my signature from old birthday cards and checks. I turned to the collateral section of the loan agreement. There it was in black and white. Tyrell had put up my apartment as collateral. He had pledged my home, the home I had shared with his mother, to a violent criminal enterprise. I sat back in my chair. The puzzle pieces slammed into place. Stephanie was not looking for loose cash. She was not looking for a few $1,000s in a safe. She was looking for the deed. They needed the physical deed to the apartment. They needed to sell the property quickly, quietly, and likely illegally to pay off Carver before the deadline. That was why they had been pressuring me to move to a nursing home. That was why they tried to have me declared incompetent. They needed me out of the way so they could liquidate my life to save theirs. I looked at the date on the loan agreement again. The repayment deadline was 48 hours from now. If they did not pay Carver by Friday, he would not send a collection agency. He would send men with hammers. That explained the crowbar. That explained the violence. They were running out of time. They were terrified. And they had assumed that I was the only obstacle in their way. They thought if they could just get into the apartment, find the deed, and sell it, they would be safe. They never imagined that the apartment was empty. They never imagined that the deed was already transferred to a shell company shielded by layers of corporate anonymity. They never imagined that I knew about Carver. I looked at the photo of Tyrell again. He looked tired. He looked scared. He looked like a stranger. The boy I raised would never have forged his father's name. The boy I raised would never have put his mother's home at risk. That boy was gone, replaced by an addict and a liar. Stephanie was in a federal holding cell, facing charges that would ruin her life. Tyrell was on the outside alone, facing a debt he could not pay to a man who did not forgive. I closed the folder. I felt a heavy stone in my chest, but it was not guilt. It was finality. I had spent years trying to protect them from themselves. I had paid their bills. I had ignored their disrespect. I had enabled their behavior because I thought that was what a father did. But I was wrong. A father teaches his children how to survive, and sometimes the only way to teach survival is to let them face the wolves alone. I picked up my glass of wine. The sun was fully up now, flooding the room with harsh, revealing light. I had cut the cord. I had burned the bridge. Tyrell was on his own. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, Tyrell was realizing that his wife was in jail and his debt was due. He would try to find another way. He would try to find another victim. But it would not be me. My phone screen lit up again. It was a notification from my bank. The automatic transfer of $4,000 that I sent to Tyrell every month for his credit card bill was scheduled to go out in an hour. I opened the banking app. I navigated to the scheduled transfers. I selected Tyrell's account. I pressed delete. Confirmed. The transfer was canceled. The safety net was gone. I took a sip of wine. It was time for breakfast. I had a busy day ahead. I needed to call my lawyer, Garrett. We had a press conference to plan. If Tyrell thought the police station was bad, wait until he saw the evening news. The war had just begun, and I had not even fired my biggest gun yet. It was 11 in the morning when Stephanie walked out of the federal holding facility. She looked nothing like the arrogant woman who had broken into my home the night before. Her hair was matted. Her makeup was smeared across her face like war paint gone wrong. She wore the same clothes she had been arrested in, but now they were wrinkled and smelled of the holding cell. She did not walk with her usual strut. She shuffled. Tyrell was waiting for her by the curb. He looked worse. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands were shaking. He had managed to scrape together the $5,000 needed for the bail bondsman, probably by maxing out the last emergency credit card I had not yet canceled, or perhaps by pawning the few pieces of jewelry Stephanie had left at their house. He hugged her, but there was no warmth in it. It was the embrace of two drowning people trying to use each other as a raft. I watched them from the comfort of my penthouse office. I was not there physically, but I was there digitally. I had tapped into the traffic cameras across the street from the precinct. It was a simple hack for someone with my background. I watched them argue on the sidewalk. Stephanie was waving her arms, screaming at him. Tyrell was shrinking into himself. They got into the silver Lexus, the car Tyrell drove like a trophy. He peeled away from the curb, cutting off a taxi. They did not go home. They did not go to a lawyer. They drove straight to the headquarters of Aegis Defense Solutions, the company I had retired from 3 years ago. Tyrell still believed the lie I had told him for decades. He thought I had worked in the mailroom or perhaps low-level IT support. He thought he could storm into my workplace, cause a scene, and shame me into fixing his mess. He thought he could bully an old man in front of his boss. He had no idea that the building he was driving toward was one of the most secure commercial structures in the city. I switched my feed to the security cameras in the lobby of Aegis. I still had administrative access. It was part of my retirement package, a courtesy for the man who built the system. Tyrell and Stephanie burst through the revolving doors. They marched up to the reception desk. The lobby was a cavernous space of marble and glass designed to intimidate. Behind the desk stood 2 security officers. They were not rent-a-cops. They were former military. They wore tailored suits and earpieces. "I want to see Langston Barnes," Tyrell shouted. His voice echoed off the hard surfaces. "Get him down here now." The head of security, a man named O'Connor, looked up from his console. He did not blink. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" O'Connor asked. His voice was calm, utterly disinterested. "I do not need an appointment," Tyrell spat. "He is my father. He works here. Tell him his son is here, and if he does not come down, I'm going to start screaming until every client in this building knows he had his own daughter-in-law arrested." O'Connor typed something into his terminal. He was likely checking the employee roster, even though he knew exactly who I was. He looked back at Tyrell. "We have no employee named Langston Barnes in the general directory," Sir O'Connor said. "Do not lie to me," Tyrell yelled. He slammed his hand on the marble desk. "He has worked here for 30 years. He is in IT or maintenance or something. Just page him." Sir O'Connor stood up. He was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. "You are causing a disturbance. You need to lower your voice or you will be removed." Stephanie stepped forward. She tried to muster some of her old entitlement, but it was fractured. "Listen, you rent-a-cop," she hissed. "My father-in-law is hiding in this building. He set me up. He put me in jail. I want to face him. I want to look him in the eye." I pressed a button on my desk phone, connecting me to O'Connor's earpiece. "Remove them, O'Connor," I said, "but send them to the coffee shop across the street. Garrett is waiting." O'Connor tapped his ear. "Copy that, sir." He walked around the desk. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. He simply occupied the space in front of Tyrell, forcing him back. "You are trespassing on private property," O'Connor said. "Leave now or you will be arrested. Again." Stephanie flinched at the word arrested. She grabbed Tyrell's arm. "Let us go, Tyrell. He is not here. He is hiding like a coward." Tyrell glared at the guard. "This is not over. You tell him this is not over." They retreated. They walked out of the building defeated by a wall of indifference. They crossed the street to the coffee shop just as I had predicted. They needed caffeine. They needed to regroup. They needed a plan. What they found instead was my lawyer. Garrett was sitting at a corner table by the window. He was wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than Tyrell's car. He had a briefcase open in front of him and a cup of black coffee steaming in his hand. He watched them enter. He waited until they had ordered and sat down 2 tables away. Then he stood up and walked over. "Mr. Barnes," Mrs. Barnes, Garrett said. He placed a business card on the table. "My name is Silas Garrett. I represent your father, Langston Barnes." Tyrell looked up. His eyes went wide. He recognized the name. Garrett was not a family lawyer. He was a shark who handled corporate litigation and high-stakes asset protection. "Where is he?" Tyrell demanded, standing up. "Where is my father?" "Your father is unavailable," Garrett said calmly. He gestured for Tyrell to sit. "Please sit down. We have business to discuss, and I charge $600 an hour, so I suggest you do not waste my time." Tyrell sat slowly. He looked confused. "Why does my dad have a lawyer like you? He cannot afford you." Garrett smiled. It was a thin, razor-sharp smile. "You would be surprised what your father can afford, Tyrell. But that is not why I am here. I am here to deliver a message and some documents." He slid a thick envelope across the table. Tyrell opened it. His hands were shaking so badly he almost tore the paper. "What is this?" Tyrell asked. "That is a cease and desist order regarding your harassment of my client," Garrett explained. "It also serves as formal notice that my client is seeking a permanent restraining order against both of you, citing the break-in and the attempted theft of classified materials." Stephanie slammed her hand on the table. "Theft. We were looking for headache medicine." Garrett ignored her. He looked directly at Tyrell. "Furthermore, Tyrell, you have been claiming to various parties, including the police, that your father is suffering from dementia or mental decline. You have threatened to seek legal guardianship." "He is crazy," Tyrell shouted. "He trapped my wife in a room with tear gas. He thinks he is a spy. He needs help. I am his son. I am his next of kin. I have a right to take care of him." Garrett reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second document. This one was stamped with the seal of the State Medical Board. "This represents the findings of 3 independent forensic psychiatrists who evaluated your father over the last 6 months," Garrett said. "They certify that Langston Barnes is of sound mind, superior intellect, and fully capable of managing his own affairs. Any attempt by you to file for guardianship will be met with a countersuit for defamation and malicious prosecution, and we will win." Tyrell stared at the document. His mouth hung open. "You evaluated him." "When?" "He evaluates himself regularly," Garrett said. "He is a careful man. He knew you would try this eventually. He was prepared." Tyrell slumped in his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been popped. "But why? Why is he doing this?" "Because you broke into his home," Garrett said. "Because you treat him like an ATM. Speaking of which," Garrett pulled out a third envelope. This one was red. "This is the notification of financial severance," Garrett said. "Effective immediately, all supplementary support provided by Langston Barnes has been terminated." Tyrell laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. "Support? What support?" "He gives me a few grand here and there." "It is not a big deal." Garrett opened a ledger. "Let us look at the numbers, shall we? Item 1. The American Express Platinum card in your name paid automatically by your father. Canceled this morning. Balance due $12,000. You are now personally liable." Tyrell's face went pale. "Item 2. Garrett continued. "The comprehensive health insurance plan for you and Stephanie. Canceled. You have 30 days to find new coverage under COBRA at your own expense." Stephanie gasped. "But I have prescriptions. I need that insurance." "You should have thought about that before you took a crowbar to the policyholder's door," Garrett said. Item 3. The car insurance on the Lexus. Canceled. Tyrell rubbed his temples. "Okay, fine. We will pay for our own insurance. Is that it?" "Not quite," Garrett said. He took a sip of his coffee. "There is the matter of the car itself." "What about the car?" Tyrell asked, defensive. "It is my car." "Is it?" Garrett asked. "Or is it a company vehicle leased by Aegis Defense Solutions and assigned to your father as part of his compensation package?" Tyrell froze. "Dad gave it to me. He said I could drive it, He allowed you to use it, Garrett corrected. It is a company asset. And since your father has formally requested that the asset be returned due to misuse by an unauthorized third party, the company is reclaiming it. You cannot take my car, Tyrell shouted. I need it for work. I need it to get around. Garrett checked his watch. Actually, the recovery team should be here right about now. Tyrell spun around in his seat to look out the window. A tow truck was backing up to the silver Lexus parked across the street. A man in a jumpsuit was already hooking the chains to the undercarriage. No, Tyrell screamed. He jumped up and ran for the door. Garrett did not move. He watched Tyrell run across the street waving his arms. He watched the tow truck driver ignore him, lift the car, and drive away. Tyrell stood in the middle of the street watching his status symbol disappear into traffic. When Tyrell came back to the table, he looked broken. He sat down heavily. He took the car, he whispered. He really took the car. He took everything Garrett said, closing his briefcase. And Tyrell, there is one more thing. Tyrell looked up. His eyes were wet. What else could there be? Garrett leaned in. The annual stipend. The $75,000 a year your father funnels into your LLC under the guise of consulting fees to help you with your taxes. That is gone too. Tyrell put his head in his hands. $75,000. That was his mortgage payment. That was his food. That was his gambling money. Without it, he was not just broke. He was underwater. He realized in that moment that he had never really supported himself. He had been a parasite living on a host he despised, and the host had just applied the pesticide. Garrett stood up. Do not contact him again. Do not go near his property. If you do, you will be arrested. Have a nice day. Garrett walked out of the coffee shop, leaving them sitting in the ruins of their financial reality. I watched on the camera feed as Tyrell pulled his phone from his pocket. It vibrated on the table. He looked at the screen. His face went from pale to gray. It was not a text from me. It was not a text from Stephanie. I knew who it was. I had seen the dossier. The text was from Carver the loan shark. I have a mirror of Tyrell's phone data thanks to the family plan he forgot he was on. I opened the message on my screen. It read simply, TikTok Tyrell, 48 hours. Bring the deed or bring a surgeon. Tyrell dropped the phone. He looked at Stephanie. We are dead, he whispered. We are dead. Stephanie looked at him. She did not offer comfort. She looked at him with the same calculation she used to look at me. She was realizing that the ship was sinking and she needed to find a life raft. I turned off the feed. Phase 1 was complete. They were stripped bare. Now desperation would set in, and desperation makes people careless. They would go back to the apartment. I knew it. They had to. They needed the deed to sell the house to pay Carver. They still thought the deed was hidden there. They still thought they could break in. They were about to meet the new owner. And that meeting would be the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. Desperation is a powerful hallucinogen. It makes you see doors where there are only walls. It makes you believe in miracles that defy the laws of physics and finance. For Tyrell and Stephanie, the miracle they needed was hiding in a false brick behind the electric fireplace of my old apartment. They were convinced the deed was there. They had to be. Because if it was not, they were not just broke, they were dead. It was 1 a.m. when they returned to the scene of the crime. Less than 24 hours after being arrested for breaking into the same unit, they were back. Carver's deadline was a noose tightening around their necks, and logic had been strangled hours ago. They did not park in the garage this time. They parked the rental car, a cheap compact that smelled of smoke, a block away. They walked to the service entrance. The lock on the service door was still broken from when the SWAT team had breached the perimeter. It hung loose, a testament to the violence of the night before. I watched them on the external cameras. They moved like hunted animals. Tyrell was sweating despite the cool night air. Stephanie was muttering to herself, her eyes darting at shadows. They took the stairs to the 4th floor, avoiding the elevator cameras they knew I monitored. They did not know I had eyes in the stairwell too. They reached the door of apartment 4B. It was a wreck. The frame was splintered. The door itself was propped up against the wall inside, held in place by a few nails. It was a temporary fix, a band-aid on a bullet wound. Tyrell pushed the door open. It creaked loudly. They stepped inside. The apartment was dark, but even in the gloom they could see it was different. It was not just empty, it was gutted. The carpets were gone, ripped up to expose the concrete subfloor. The kitchen cabinets had been torn from the walls. The drywall in the living room had been stripped back to the studs. It looked like a construction site. "Where is the fireplace?" Stephanie whispered. Her voice trembled. Tyrell shone his flashlight around the room. The electric fireplace, the one I had installed 10 years ago to hide the wall safe, was gone. In its place was a gaping hole in the brickwork. No, Tyrell moaned. He ran to the hole. He fell to his knees and clawed at the dust and debris. No, it has to be here. He shone the light into the cavity. It was empty. Not just empty of the deed, empty of the safe, empty of hope. "Someone took it," Stephanie said. Her voice rose in pitch. "The police took it. Or your dad took it. We need that deed," Tyrell screamed. He punched the exposed brick. His knuckles split, but he did not seem to feel it. "Carver is going to kill me, Steph. He is going to kill us." Suddenly, the lights in the apartment blazed to life. Tyrell and Stephanie froze. They shielded their eyes against the glare. Standing in the doorway where the bedroom used to be was a man. He was not a police officer. He was not me. He was wearing a tailored Italian suit and inspecting a blueprint on a tablet. He looked up at them with mild annoyance. "Can I help you?" the man asked. His voice was smooth, cultured, and completely out of place in this ruin. "Who are you?" Tyrell demanded, scrambling to his feet. "What are you doing in my father's house?" The man tapped his tablet. "Your father's house. I assume you mean Langston Barnes." "Yes," Tyrell said, stepping forward. "Where is he? Where is the safe?" "Mr. Barnes no longer owns this property," the man said. "He sold it." "Sold it?" Stephanie gasped. "When?" "Yesterday at noon," the man said. "The transaction was a cash offer, immediate closing. I represent the Olympus Group. We acquire high-value properties for redevelopment." "High value?" Tyrell laughed. It was a manic sound. "This dump. It is worth maybe 500 grand on a good day. My dad was a maintenance worker." The man smiled. It was a pitying smile. "Maintenance worker, is that what he told you? This unit is not just apartment 4B. It is a combined title including units 4A, 4C, and the expansive roof rights directly above us. Mr. Barnes spent 20 years acquiring the neighboring units through shell companies and merging the titles. This is a 4,000 square foot penthouse shell with exclusive skyline access." Tyrell stared at him. He could not process the words. 4,000 square feet. Roof rights. "How much?" Stephanie whispered. "How much did he sell it for?" The man hesitated, then shrugged. "It is public record now. $4.5 million. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. 4.5 million. Tyrell's knees gave out. He sat down hard on the dusty concrete. 4 million, he whispered. He had $4 million in this walls. And he let me borrow 5 grand for bail. He did not let you borrow it, the man corrected. He paid it. Just like he paid the condo fees, the taxes, and the special assessments for this building for the last 15 years. But that is history. The point is, you are trespassing. This is private corporate property. I suggest you leave before I call security. They are less polite than the federal agents who were here last night. Stephanie looked at Tyrell. Her eyes were wide with horror. We lost it, Tyrell. We lost the collateral. Carver is going to find out. Tyrell looked up at her. His eyes were not scared anymore. They were filled with a cold, burning hate. We lost it, he said, standing up slowly. We lost it because you could not wait. What? Stephanie stepped back. You had to break in, Tyrell said, his voice rising. You had to use a crowbar. You had to make him leave. If we had just waited, if we had just been patient, we would have inherited $4 million. 4 million, Steph. We would have been set for life. It was your idea, Stephanie screamed back. You owe Carver money. You forged the signature. Because you spend $10,000 a month on clothes, Tyrell roared. Because you need to live like a Kardashian on a mechanic's salary. I borrowed that money for you. Liar, Stephanie spat. You gambled it, Tyrell snapped. The stress, the fear, the realization that he had been sitting on a gold mine while digging for pennies, it broke something in him. He swung his hand. It was not a slap. It was a backhand fueled by a lifetime of inadequacy. It connected with Stephanie's cheek with a sickening crack. She spun around and fell into the pile of drywall debris. She looked up at him, blood trickling from her lip. Her eyes were filled with shock. You hit me, she whispered. You ruined me, Tyrell screamed. You ruined everything. Get up, get out. I never want to see you again. Stephanie scrambled to her feet. She looked at the man in the suit who was watching the domestic violence with a look of bored distaste. Call the police, she said to the man pointing at Tyrell. He assaulted me. I would advise against that. the man said calmly. Given your current legal status regarding the federal break-in, adding a domestic dispute to the file might complicate your bail conditions. I suggest you both leave, separately if you prefer. Stephanie looked at Tyrell one last time. It was a look of pure venom. Then she turned and ran out of the apartment. Tyrell stood there panting. He looked at his hand. He looked at the empty hole where the fireplace used to be. $4 million, he whispered again to the empty room. He turned to the man. Where did he go? Where is my father? The man looked at his tablet. Mr. Barnes left specific instructions regarding that inquiry. What are they? Tyrell asked, desperate. He said to tell you that he has gone to a place where he cannot be a burden, and that he hopes you find a way to pay your own bills for once. Tyrell let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He turned and walked out of the apartment. He walked down the hall past the elevator to the stairwell. He had no car. He had no wife. He had no inheritance. And in 48 hours, he might not have a life. I watched him go on the monitor. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was small. He had made his choices. He had chosen the wife. He had chosen the debt. He had chosen to underestimate me. I closed the laptop. The apartment was sold. The money was wired. The ties were severed. Now I just had to wait for the fallout. Because when Carver found out the collateral was gone, he would not be sending a lawyer. He would be sending a message. And Tyrell was the only one left to receive it. Stephanie did not go into hiding. She went viral. 2 days after the incident at the apartment, she launched her counterattack not in a courtroom but on TikTok. I sat in my penthouse study and watched the video play on my monitor. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She sat on the floor of what looked like a cheap motel room. The lighting was dim. Her hair was messy and she wore no makeup. The bruise Tyrell had given her was prominently displayed on her cheek, purple and angry. She looked small. She looked broken. She looked like a victim. I held my breath as she began to speak. Her voice was a trembling whisper. She told the camera that she was homeless. She said her father-in-law, a wealthy and powerful man, had thrown her and her husband onto the streets in the middle of winter. She claimed the apartment break-in was a lie fabricated by a man losing his mind. But then she went further. She crossed a line I did not think even she would touch. She looked directly into the lens, tears streaming down her face, and said that the security cameras I had installed were not for protection. She said they were there because I liked to watch her. She claimed I had made inappropriate comments. She claimed I had touched her. She said the reason she went to the apartment that night was to retrieve evidence of my harassment, and that I had called a SWAT team to silence her. The video was titled "The Monster in Apartment 4B. By noon it had 2 million views. By dinner it had 4 million. The comments section was a river of digital hatred. People were calling for my arrest. They were finding my old address. They were doxing the shell company that bought the apartment. They wanted blood. Tyrell was in the video too. He sat behind her, his hand on her shoulder, looking somber and supportive. He nodded along to her lies, validating every slanderous word. He looked like a protective husband standing up to an abusive father. It was the greatest performance of his life. He had realized that he could not get money from me directly, so he was going to extract it through public shaming. He was betting that a man like me, a man who valued privacy above all else, would pay anything to make the noise stop. I turned off the monitor. My hands were steady, but my heart was cold. They had taken my reputation. They had taken my dignity. They had turned my love and protection into something perverse for internet points. They thought they were controlling the narrative. They did not know they had just handed me the weapon that would end them. The fallout was immediate and visceral. I had to go to my old post office box to retrieve some final documents that had not been forwarded. I drove my black SUV and parked a block away wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I thought I was invisible. I was wrong. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor of 20 years, was coming out of the post office. She was a woman I had shoveled snow for, a woman whose cat I had rescued from a tree. She saw me. Her eyes went wide, not with recognition but with revulsion. She did not say hello. She spat on the ground in front of my feet. "You are a sick old man," she hissed loud enough for people on the street to hear. "I saw what you did to that poor girl. You should be in jail." I did not respond. I walked past her, keeping my head down. I felt the eyes of the town on me. The whispers followed me like a cloud of flies. I was a pariah in the community I had called home for decades. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Tyrell. I got back into the car and looked at it. The message read simply, "We can make another video clarifying things." We can tell them it was a misunderstanding caused by your dementia. But legal fees are expensive, Dad. $200,000 wire transfer. You have 24 hours. It was blackmail, plain and simple. He was using his wife's lies and the mob's anger to squeeze me. He was desperate. Carver's deadline was looming, and this was his Hail Mary pass. He thought I would be terrified. He thought I would panic at the thought of being branded a predator. I looked at the text and felt a strange sense of calm. He had put it in writing. He had just committed extortion across state lines via a telecommunications device. It was another felony to add to the pile. But I did not need the police for this. Not yet. I needed to destroy their credibility first. I needed to show the world exactly who the monster really was. I did not reply to Tyrell. I did not engage with the comments on social media. I drove back to the Meridian Tower and went straight to my server room. I sat down at the terminal and pulled up the archived footage from the last 2 months. I had terabytes of video. I had hours of audio. I had watched them steal. I had watched them search for money. But there was other footage. Footage I had flagged but never fully processed because it was too painful to watch. Footage that showed the true depth of their hatred. I inserted an encrypted USB drive into the tower. I began to transfer selected files. I did not choose the clips of them stealing silver spoons or looking for cash. Those were crimes of greed. The public might forgive greed. They might say the economy is hard. They might say young people make mistakes. I chose the clips that showed their souls. I finished the transfer and pulled the drive. I called Garrett, my lawyer. Garrett, I said when he answered, "Are you watching the news?" "I am seeing it, Langston," he replied, his voice tight. "It is a disaster. We need to issue a statement. We need to sue for defamation. This is spiraling out of control. Do not issue a statement," I said. "Call a press conference tomorrow morning. Invite everyone. The networks, the bloggers, the influencers. Tell them I am going to address the allegations personally." "Langston, are you sure?" Garrett asked. "Putting you in front of cameras right now is risky. They will tear you apart." "I am not going to speak, Garrett," I said. "I am just going to play a movie. I am sending a courier with a USB drive. Guard it with your life. And Garrett, bring popcorn." The next morning, the conference room at Garrett's firm was packed. The air was thick with hostility. Reporters were shouting questions before I even sat down. They wanted to know if I was a predator. They wanted to know if I was ashamed. Tyrell and Stephanie were watching, I was sure of it. They were probably celebrating, thinking I was about to apologize and write a check. Garrett stepped to the podium. He raised his hands for silence. "My client will not be taking questions," he announced. "However, in the interest of full transparency regarding the character of the accusers, we would like to share some home security footage that provides context to their relationship." The room went quiet. Garrett nodded to his assistant, who pressed play on the large screen behind us. The first clip was dated 3 weeks ago. It showed the living room of my old apartment. I was out at the grocery store. Stephanie was there alone. She was standing in front of the mantel where I kept Viola's urn and her favorite photo. On the screen, Stephanie picked up the photo. She looked at it with a sneer. She said clear as a bell, "I am so glad you are dead, you old witch. You were always in the way." Then she spat on the glass. She wiped the spit across Viola's face with her thumb, laughing. She put the photo back and knocked the urn over slightly just to be petty. A gasp went through the room of reporters. Disrespecting the dead is a universal taboo. The narrative of the poor victimized girl cracked. But the second clip was the one that silenced the room completely. It was dated 2 days before the break-in. It was in the kitchen. Tyrell and Stephanie were sitting at the table. They thought they were alone. They were crushing pills into a fine powder on a cutting board. "How much do we use?" Stephanie asked on the video. Tyrell looked at the powder, just enough to make him confused. He said, "We do not want to kill him yet. We just want the doctor to think he is losing it." Stephanie laughed. "If we give him a little more, his heart might just give out." "It would solve all our problems, Tyrell. Think about the insurance. No more waiting. Just a nice, quiet heart attack in his sleep." Tyrell paused. He looked at the powder, then he looked at her. "Make it a double dose," he said. "Let us get this over with." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the conference room was absolute. It was the silence of a mob realizing they had been marching for the villains. I stood up. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the red recording lights that were broadcasting this to the world. My son and his wife did not break into my home to get headache medicine, I said. My voice was steady. They broke into my home because they had failed to poison me 2 days prior, and they were running out of time to sell my house to pay a loan shark. The woman who claimed I harassed her is the same woman you just watched plotting my murder. I walked out of the room. I did not look back. I did not need to answer questions. The video was already trending. The tide had turned. It was a tsunami now, and it was heading straight for Tyrell and Stephanie. I got into the elevator. My phone buzzed. It was not Tyrell. He would not be calling anymore. It was a notification from the news. The headline read, "Viral victim caught on tape plotting murder." I allowed myself a small smile. The media war was over. I had nuked the battlefield. Now it was time for the real soldiers to move in, because plotting murder is not a civil matter, and the FBI takes a very dim view of domestic terrorism, especially when it involves their assets. Garrett stood at the podium in the conference room of his law firm. The room was packed with journalists who smelled blood. They had come expecting a defensive statement or a plea for privacy. They had come to watch a wealthy lawyer try to spin a narrative for a guilty client. Garrett did not disappoint them, but he gave them a different kind of show. I watched from my monitors in the penthouse. I saw Tyrell and Stephanie watching too. I had tracked their IP address to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. They were huddled around a laptop, probably hoping for an apology. "My client Langston Barnes has been accused of harassment abuse and senility," Garrett began. His voice was low and controlled. He commanded the room without raising a finger. "These accusations are serious. They destroy reputations. They incite violence. And they are categorically false." He paused. The cameras clicked furiously. "We do not ask you to take our word for it," Garrett continued. "We ask you to believe your own eyes and ears. The following footage was recorded in Mr. Barnes' residence 2 days prior to the break-in. It captures the accusers, Mrs. Stephanie Barnes and Mr. Tyrell Barnes, discussing their future plans regarding my client." Garrett stepped aside. The screen behind him illuminated. The video played. It was the kitchen scene. The audio was crystal clear. Stephanie was pacing back and forth. Tyrell was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. "We cannot wait for nature," Stephanie said on the screen. Her face was twisted in a sneer that the high-definition camera captured perfectly. "That old black man is too healthy. He is going to live another 20 years. We do not have 20 years, we do not have 20 days. Tyrell looked up. "I cannot just kill him, Steph. He is my father." Stephanie grabbed his face. She dug her nails into his cheeks. "He is not your father. He is a bank account that refuses to dispense cash. Think about the insurance, Tyrell. Accidental death pays double. If he falls down the stairs or takes the wrong pills, the money comes to us immediately. That old black man needs to die, so the insurance money comes to us. Do you understand?" Tyrell hesitated on screen. Then he nodded. "Okay. But it has to look like an accident." The video cut to black. The silence in the press room was heavy. It was the silence of shock. The reporters looked at each other. They looked at their notes. The narrative they had been fed by Stephanie on TikTok, the story of the poor, victimized daughter-in-law, had just been incinerated. They had just watched her solicit murder. They had heard the racial contempt in her voice, the dehumanization of the man who had given her a home. Garrett returned to the podium. "We will be filing civil suits for defamation and emotional distress," Garrett said. "We have also forwarded this footage to the district attorney for consideration of charges regarding conspiracy to commit murder. Thank you." He walked out. He did not take questions. He did not need to. The video was the answer to every question. I watched the live feed from Tyrell's laptop camera, which I had compromised an hour ago. The color drained from Stephanie's face. She looked like a ghost. Tyrell was staring at the screen, his mouth open in a silent scream. They knew. In that moment, they knew that the court of public opinion had just sentenced them to social death. The reaction was instantaneous. It was a digital landslide. The internet does not forgive, and it moves faster than any court of law. Within 10 minutes, the hashtag Justice for Langston was trending worldwide. The comments on Stephanie's original video turned from sympathy to vitriol. People were dissecting her performance, analyzing her fake tears, calling her a monster. Stephanie's phone rang. It was sitting on the motel bed next to the laptop. She stared at it. The caller ID said, "Boss." She picked it up, her hand trembling. "Hello, Mr. Henderson? Do not come in." Stephanie, a voice barked loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "What?" Stephanie stammered. "But I can explain. That video is taken out of context. It is a deep fake." "Shut up, Stephanie," the voice said. "We have morals at this company. We do not employ people who plot to kill their in-laws. You are fired. Do not come for your things. We will mail them to you in a box. If you set foot on the property, security will arrest you." The line went dead. Stephanie dropped the phone. She looked at Tyrell. "I got fired," she whispered. Tyrell did not answer. His own phone was buzzing incessantly, but it was not his boss. It was his friends, his drinking buddies, the guys he played poker with. I checked the message logs on my screen. One text from a friend named Marcus read, "Dude, I just saw the news. Do not ever contact me again. You are sick." Another from his cousin read, "You wanted to kill Uncle Langston after everything he did for you. You are dead to this family, Tyrell. Do not show your face at the barbecue. Do not call Mom. You are done." Tyrell watched the messages roll in. He tried to reply to Marcus, but the message failed to send. "He blocked me," Tyrell said, his voice hollow. "Marcus blocked me. Everyone is blocking me." He looked at Stephanie, the woman who had promised him the world, the woman who had convinced him that I was the enemy. "This is your fault," he said quietly. "You had to make a video. You had to go viral. Now the whole world knows." "My fault," Stephanie shrieked, standing up. "You agreed. You said make it a double dose. You are on that tape too, Tyrell. We are in this together." Tyrell put his head in his hands. "We have no jobs. We have no friends. We have no money. And now we have the DA looking at us for conspiracy." But that was not the worst of it. They were worried about the police. They were worried about their reputations. They were looking at the fire in front of them and ignoring the tsunami coming up behind them. Because someone else was watching that press conference. Someone else had seen the video. And that someone did not care about hashtags or social justice. Carver the loan shark was a businessman. He dealt in risk assessment. He had lent Tyrell $150,000 based on a single asset, the apartment. He had believed Tyrell's lie that I was senile and that the property would be theirs within the month. I switched my monitor view to the external camera of the motel where Tyrell and Stephanie were hiding. I had tracked them via the GPS in their rental car. A black sedan with tinted windows rolled slowly into the parking lot. It was a Lincoln Town Car, older model, heavy and menacing. It did not park in a spot. It idled directly in front of room 104. Tyrell's room. I saw Tyrell stand up and walk to the window. He peeked through the blinds. On my screen, I saw his face go from despair to terror. He recognized the car. "It is him," Tyrell whispered. "It is Carver's men." Stephanie ran to the window. "Who is Carver?" "The man I owe money to," Tyrell said. "The man who is going to break my legs." Carver had seen the video. He had heard Stephanie say, "The old man is too healthy. He is going to live another 20 years. To a loan shark, that sentence meant one thing. The collateral was worthless. The inheritance was a fantasy. Tyrell was not a rich heir in waiting. He was a broke, unemployed fraud with no assets and no future. The rear window of the Lincoln rolled down. A man in the back seat looked at the motel door. He did not get out. He simply raised his hand and pointed a finger at the door like a gun. He held it there for a long moment, then mimed the recoil. Tyrell fell back from the window, scrambling across the floor like a crab. "They know," he gasped. "They know I cannot pay." Stephanie looked at him with horror. "How much do you owe them, Tyrell?" $150,000, Tyrell sobbed. Stephanie's face went blank. She did the math. No job, no house, no inheritance, and a debt that came with a death sentence. "We have to leave," she said. "We have to run," where Tyrell cried. "We have no money for gas. We have no cards. The accounts are frozen. We have to go to your dad," she said. It was the logic of the insane. What Tyrell looked at her like she had grown a second head. "He is the only one who can stop this," she insisted. "He has money. He can pay Carver. We just have to force him." "Force him?" Tyrell asked. "How?" "He is in a fortress. We do not even know where he is." "We find him," Stephanie said, her eyes wide and manic. "We find him and we make him sign over the rest. The patents, the offshore accounts. We make him save us. It was a suicide mission. It was the plan of two rats trapped in a corner lashing out at the cat, but they had no other choice. The black car outside was a clock ticking down to 0. I watched them pack their few belongings. I watched them argue. I watched them spiral. They were coming for me, not for medicine, not for a deed. They were coming for my life because it was the only currency they had left to trade for their own. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number that went straight to a secure voicemail. "This is Director Barnes," I said. "I have a code red situation developing. 2 hostiles are inbound. They are desperate and they are armed with stupidity. I am initiating the honeypot protocol at the secondary site." I hung up. I looked at the screen one last time. Tyrell and Stephanie were sneaking out the back window of the motel bathroom trying to avoid the black car. They were running straight into the fire. I stood up and put on my jacket. I had to get to the warehouse. I had to set the stage for the final act. If they wanted to play gangsters, I would show them what a real war looked like. And this time there would be no SWAT team to save them from themselves. The warehouse was waiting. And so was the truth about what their father really did for a living. Desperation has a smell. It smells like stale sweat, cheap motel air conditioning, and the gun oil on a black market pistol. Tyrell sat on the edge of the mattress in the motel room staring at the weapon in his hands. It was a 9mm with the serial number filed off. He had bought it an hour ago from a contact he knew from his gambling circles. It cost him his wedding ring and the last $500 he had hidden in his shoe. Stephanie paced the small room like a caged tiger. She was manic. The fear of Carver the loan shark had pushed her past the point of rationality. She was no longer thinking about survival. She was thinking about conquest. She stopped pacing and looked at Tyrell. "Do you know how to use it?" she asked. Her voice was brittle. Tyrell looked up. His eyes were hollow. "I think so. You just point and pull the trigger right." "You have to be ready, Tyrell," she said, grabbing his shoulders. "You have to be ready to do whatever it takes. This is not just about the money anymore. It is about justice. He humiliated us. He destroyed our lives. He owes us everything." Tyrell nodded slowly. The narrative she was spinning was insane, but it was the only thing keeping him from putting the gun in his own mouth. "He owes us," he repeated. Stephanie pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. It was a printout she had stolen from my office months ago during one of her snooping sessions. It was a list of patent filings. "The house is gone," she said, tapping the paper. "The cash is frozen. But these patents, Tyrell, he owns the intellectual property for the guidance chips used in half the drones in the military. These are worth 10 times what the apartment was worth. We get him to sign over the rights. We get a notary. We sell them to a competitor. We pay Carver and we disappear to an island." It was a fantasy. Transferring intellectual property of that magnitude requires teams of lawyers and government clearance. But to 2 desperate people with a gun, it looked like a plan. It looked like a lifeline. "We have to find him first," Tyrell said, standing up. He tucked the gun into his waistband. "I know where he is going," Stephanie said. "I tracked his phone." "You tracked him?" Tyrell asked, surprised. "I put an AirTag in the lining of his SUV trunk 3 months ago," she said with a twisted smile, "just in case he ever got lost. He is on the move, Tyrell. He is leaving the city." They grabbed their bags. They ran out the back door of the motel, avoiding the black Lincoln parked out front. They got into their rental car. Tyrell drove. Stephanie navigated. They were not running away anymore. They were hunting. And they had no idea that the prey was leading them exactly where he wanted them to go. I sat in the driver's seat of my armored SUV watching the blue dot on my dashboard navigation screen. The dot was me. The red dot trailing 3 miles behind me was them. I knew about the AirTag. I had found it the day she planted it. I had left it there because misinformation is a powerful tool. Today, I was using it to reel them in. I was not fleeing the city. I was leading a parade. I turned off the main highway and took the exit toward the industrial sector. This was the graveyard of industry. Empty factories, rusted water towers, and miles of chain-link fences. It was desolate. It was quiet. It was perfect. I checked my rear-view mirror. The gray sedan was there, keeping a distance that they probably thought was discreet. It was amateur hour. They were changing lanes every few minutes, trying to blend in with the non-existent traffic. I picked up my secure phone. "Director Barnes here," I said. "I am approaching Site Bravo, 2 hostiles in pursuit. They are armed and unstable." "Copy that." Director, a voice crackled in my ear. "Perimeter is secure. All non-essential personnel have been evacuated. The stage is yours." I hung up. I did not want the police involved yet. I did not want a roadside arrest. That would be too easy. It would be too public. I needed them to commit the act. I needed them to cross the line from harassment to kidnapping. I needed them to walk into a federal facility with a weapon and intent to harm a government asset. That was the only way to ensure they went away for a long time. Not to a county jail, but to a federal supermax. I pressed the accelerator. The SUV surged forward. I wanted them to think I was trying to lose them. I wanted to trigger their predator instinct. Behind me, Tyrell saw the SUV speed up. "He sees us," he yelled, slamming his foot on the gas. "He is trying to run. Do not let him get away." Stephanie screamed, clutching the dashboard. "If we lose him now, we are dead. Carver will find us tonight." The rental car whined as Tyrell pushed it to 80 miles an hour. They swerved around a pothole. They ran a red light. They were terrified, but the terror gave them focus. They had one goal: catch the old man, make him sign, survive. I led them deeper into the wasteland. The buildings here were massive, windowless monoliths. We passed the old steel mill. We passed the chemical plant. Finally, I saw the turnoff. It was an unmarked gravel road blocked by a gate that looked rusted and broken. It was not broken. As my SUV approached the gate, scanned my license plate, and swung open silently. I drove through. I watched the monitor as the gate stayed open just long enough for the gray sedan to follow before slamming shut behind them. They were inside the perimeter. I drove toward the large warehouse at the end of the road. It looked like an abandoned hangar, ideally suited for horror movies and bad decisions. I pulled the SUV into the center of the vast empty space and killed the engine. I did not get out. I waited. The gray sedan skidded to a halt 20 yards behind me. The doors flew open. Tyrell and Stephanie jumped out. Tyrell had the gun in his hand. He was shaking, but the weapon was pointed at my door. "Get out!" he screamed. His voice cracked. "Get out of the car right now." I watched them through the bulletproof glass. They looked small in the shadow of the warehouse. They looked like children playing a game they did not understand. I opened the door slowly. I stepped out. I raised my hands to shoulder height. I did not look scared. I looked disappointed. "Tyrell, put the gun down," I said, calm and loud. "Shut up!" Stephanie yelled, rushing forward. She shoved a piece of paper at me. It was a hastily typed transfer of assets document. Sign it. Sign it now, or he shoots." I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Tyrell. "You are going to shoot your father for patents, Tyrell," I asked. "I am going to shoot you because you left us no choice," he shouted. "You took the car. You took the money. You humiliated us. You owe us this. Just sign the papers, Dad. Sign them and we leave." I took a step forward. Tyrell flinched. He tightened his grip on the gun. "You think this is an abandoned warehouse?" I asked, looking around at the steel beams and the shadows. "It is a dump," Stephanie spat. "Who cares what it is? Sign the paper." "It is not a dump," I said, lowering my hands. "It is a Honeywell testing facility for urban warfare acoustics and ballistics. I bought it 10 years ago through the firm. Do you know what that means, Tyrell?" "It means nobody can hear you scream," Stephanie said with a smirk. "No," I corrected her. "It means this entire building is a sensor. Every word you say is being recorded. Every movement is being tracked. And right now you are standing in the center of a federal kill box." Tyrell looked around nervously. He saw nothing but dust and shadows. "You are bluffing," he said. "You are always bluffing. You are just a lonely old man playing spy." I sighed. I had hoped he would see reason. I had hoped he would look at the gate that had locked behind him and realize he was trapped. But greed is a blinder. "I am not playing Tyrell," I said. I dropped my hand to my side. I tapped a command into the smart watch on my wrist. Suddenly the warehouse was not dark anymore. High-intensity floodlights snapped on from the catwalks 40 feet above us. The light was blinding white, searing. It washed out the shadows. It exposed the grime on their faces and the terror in their eyes. Tyrell stumbled back, shielding his eyes with his free arm. The gun wavered. "What is this?" he screamed. "This is the end of the road, son," I said. I did not move. I did not run. I stood my ground. Because I knew something they did not. I knew that the moment Tyrell raised that weapon on federal property, he had signed his own death warrant. And I knew that the men watching from the catwalks, the men in black tactical gear with laser sights trained on Tyrell's chest, were waiting for my signal, but I was not going to give the signal yet. I had one more card to play, one more truth to reveal that would hurt them more than a bullet. I looked at Stephanie. She was squinting against the light, trying to see into the rafters. "Before you shoot me, Tyrell," I said, my voice amplified by the warehouse acoustics, "you should ask your wife where she got the $50,000 to pay the forger." Stephanie froze. Her head snapped toward me. "Shut up," she hissed. Tyrell blinked, trying to focus. "What are you talking about? She sold her jewelry." "She did not have $50,000 in jewelry," I said. "She got the money from Carver." Tyrell lowered the gun slightly. "Carver, the loan shark." "Why would Carver give her money?" "Because she made a deal, Tyrell," I said. "She promised him that once you were dead, she would sign the apartment over to him. She did not plan to pay your debt, son. She planned to pay hers with your life insurance." "Liar!" Stephanie screamed, lunging at me. "He is lying, Tyrell. Shoot him." Tyrell looked at her. Then he looked at me. The doubt was there. The seed was planted. "Check her phone, Tyrell," I said. "Check the deleted messages folder. Look for the contact named insurance agent. That is Carver." Tyrell turned the gun towards Stephanie. "Give me your phone," he said. His voice was cold. "Tyrell, do not be an idiot," she shouted. "We are in the middle of a kidnapping. Shoot him. Give me the phone," Tyrell roared. Stephanie backed away. No. That was all the confirmation he needed. The betrayal was complete. The team was broken. And that was when I gave the signal. Not for the snipers to fire, but for the truth to be the only thing left standing in the room. I raised my hand. "Drop the weapon, Tyrell," I said. "It is over." Tyrell looked at me, his face a mask of agony. He realized he had lost everything. His wife, his father, his future. He raised the gun again, but this time he did not point it at me. He pointed it at Stephanie. "You sold me out," he whispered. Stephanie screamed, and the warehouse exploded into chaos. The barrel of the 9mm wavered in the air like a compass needle searching for magnetic north, but Tyrell could not find a steady direction. His hands were slick with sweat, and the cheap plastic grip of the illegal firearm was slipping in his palm. The warehouse was silent except for the hum of the high-voltage floodlights I had activated and the ragged, terrified breathing of my son. He looked at me, and then he looked at the gun, and then he looked back at me. He was trying to summon the courage to be a killer, but he was failing because at his core he was not a wolf. He was a sheep who had been led to the slaughterhouse by the woman standing next to him. Stephanie was vibrating with adrenaline. Her face was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated greed. She did not have a gun, but she was the one pulling the trigger. She shoved the crumpled transfer documents toward me again, thrusting the paper so close to my face I could smell the desperation on her skin. "Sign the damn papers, Langston," she shrieked. Her voice echoed off the corrugated steel walls, returning to us as a distorted, demonic chorus. "Sign them or he will shoot you. Do it, Tyrell. Show him you are a man. Put a bullet in his leg if he does not write his name." I did not look at the paper. I did not look at the gun. I looked at Tyrell. I saw the tears pooling in his eyes. I saw the conflict tearing him apart. He wanted the money. He wanted the safety. But he did not want to kill his father. He was waiting for me to save him one last time. He was waiting for me to take the gun away, or sign the paper, or tell him everything was going to be okay. I did none of those things. Instead, I looked around the empty warehouse floor. There was a single wooden crate sitting in the center of the illuminated circle, a prop left over from a ballistics test 3 years ago. I walked over to it slowly, deliberately. Tyrell flinched, tracking me with the muzzle of the gun, but he did not fire. I sat down on the crate. I crossed my legs. I brushed a speck of dust from my trousers. I looked like a CEO waiting for a board meeting to begin, not a hostage facing execution. This act of casual defiance broke Stephanie's brain. She pulled at her hair, letting out a frustrated, guttural sound. "Why are you sitting down?" she screamed. "This is not a game. We are going to kill you." "No, you are not, Stephanie," I said calmly. My voice carried perfectly in the acoustic chamber. "Tyrell is not going to kill me, and you are not going to get these patents. And do you know why? Because you are stubborn," she yelled. "Because you are a selfish old man who cares more about his money than his son's life." "No," I said. "Because Tyrell is just realizing that he is holding the gun at the wrong person." Tyrell blinked. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "Just sign the papers, please. I do not want to hurt you." "But Carver is going to kill me." "Carver is not going to kill you, Tyrell," I said softly. "Carver is going to kill you because Stephanie told him to." The sentence hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Tyrell lowered the gun an inch. What he whispered. Stephanie froze. Her eyes darted from me to Tyrell. "Do not listen to him, Tyrell. He is trying to confuse you. He is playing mind games. Shoot him." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Tyrell jerked the gun up again, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Easy, son," I said. "I am not reaching for a weapon. I am reaching for the truth." I pulled out a thick envelope. It was not the patents. It was the surveillance packet my private investigator had handed me 4 hours ago. It contained the final piece of the puzzle, the evidence that turned this from a tragedy into a reckoning. I tossed the envelope onto the concrete floor. It slid across the dusty surface and stopped at Tyrell's feet. "Pick it up," I commanded. Tyrell looked at the envelope. Then he looked at Stephanie. She was pale now. She knew what was in there. She lunged for it, trying to kick it away, but Tyrell was faster. He stepped on the envelope, trapping it under his sneaker. "Do not open that, Tyrell," Stephanie pleaded. Her voice had lost its edge. It was thin and scared. "It is just lies. Photoshopped lies." Tyrell kept his eyes on her while he crouched down. He picked up the envelope. He opened the flap with one hand, keeping the gun pointed generally in my direction with the other. He pulled out the stack of glossy 8x10 photographs. The first photo showed Stephanie entering a luxury hotel downtown. She was wearing a red dress Tyrell had bought her for their anniversary. The second photo showed her meeting a man in the lobby. The man was large, bald, and wearing a silk suit. It was Carver the loan shark. The third photo showed them entering the elevator together. Carver's hand was on the small of her back. It was familiar. It was possessive. The fourth photo was taken through the window of a hotel suite. The curtains were partially open. Stephanie and Carver were kissing. It was not a coerced kiss. It was passionate. Tyrell dropped the gun to his side. His arm went limp. He stared at the photos. He shuffled through them. There were more. Stephanie and Carver having dinner. Stephanie and Carver laughing. Stephanie accepting a thick envelope of cash from Carver, the same $50,000 she had used to pay the forger. "You are sleeping with him," Tyrell whispered. The words were barely audible. Stephanie stepped back, shaking her head frantically. "No, Tyrell, it is not what it looks like. I did it for us. I had to get close to him. I had to buy us time." I leaned forward on the crate. "Tell him the rest, Stephanie," I said, my voice cutting through her lies. "Tell him about the deal." She glared at me with pure hatred. "Shut up, old man. Tell him I roared." She flinched. "I will tell him," I said. Tyrell looked at the last document in the stack. It is a transcript of a text conversation recovered from her burner phone. Tyrell pulled the last sheet of paper from the envelope. His eyes scanned the lines. I watched him read the words that shattered his world. Carver. "When do I get the rest of the money?" Stephanie. "As soon as the old man is dead. Tyrell will sign the house over to me to pay the debt. Then I will sign it over to you." Carver. "And what about Tyrell?" Stephanie. "Once the house is yours, you can do whatever you want with him. An accident would be convenient. Then I collect the spousal life insurance too." Tyrell dropped the paper. It fluttered to the ground, landing next to the photo of his wife kissing the man who threatened to break his legs. He looked up at Stephanie. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. "You were going to let him kill me," he said. His voice was flat, dead. Stephanie was crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Tyrell, please listen. I was scared. I did not mean it. I was just telling him what he wanted to hear so he would not hurt us." "You slept with him," Tyrell said. "You took his money. You set me up." He raised the gun. This time his hand was not shaking. This time he was not looking at his father. He was looking at the woman who had turned him into a criminal, who had turned him against his family, who had planned to sell him for an insurance payout. "No," Stephanie screamed, holding up her hands. "Tyrell, stop. He is manipulating you. He wants us to fight." "I am not manipulating anyone," I said quietly. "I am just turning on the lights." Tyrell took a step toward her. The rage radiating off him was palpable. It was heat. It was fire. "I forged my father's signature for you," he screamed. "I broke into his house for you. I was ready to kill him for you. And you were laughing at me the whole time." Stephanie backed away, stumbling over the uneven concrete. She hit the wall of the warehouse. There was nowhere left to run. Tyrell put the gun down, she begged. "We can fix this. We can leave. We can go to Mexico." "There is no we," Tyrell roared. "There is only you and the lies you fed me." He cocked the hammer of the gun. The click was loud, metallic, and final. I stood up. The situation had escalated past the point of control. Tyrell was not going to arrest her. He was going to execute her. And as much as I despised her, I could not let my son become a murderer in front of federal agents. "Tyrell," I shouted, "stop! Do not do it! She is not worth it!" Tyrell did not look at me. His eyes were locked on Stephanie. "She took everything from me," he whispered. Stephanie saw the look in his eyes. She saw death. And in that moment, her survival instinct overrode her fear. She lunged. She threw herself at Tyrell, grabbing for the gun. They collided in a tangle of limbs in desperation. Tyrell shouted in surprise. Stephanie clawed at his face, digging her nails into his eyes. Tyrell tried to shove her away, but she held on tight, gripping the barrel of the weapon. "Let go!" he screamed. I ran toward them. I needed to intervene. I needed to stop this before it became irreversible. But I was too slow. I was 69 years old, and they were fueled by the energy of pure hatred. They wrestled for the gun, twisting and turning. The barrel pointed at the ceiling, then at the floor, then wildly around the room. And then it happened. Stephanie yanked the gun toward herself, trying to wrench it from Tyrell's grip. Tyrell reflexively pulled back his finger, still inside the trigger guard. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. It was not like the movies. It was a crack of thunder that hurt the ears. The muzzle flash lit up their faces for a split second, illuminating the horror in both of their eyes. They froze. For a second, nobody moved. The echo of the shot rolled around the warehouse, fading into silence. Then Stephanie let go of the gun. She took a step back. She looked down at her stomach. There was a small, dark hole in her white shirt. It was spreading rapidly, turning red. She looked up at Tyrell. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked surprised. Tyrell stared at her. He stared at the smoking gun in his hand. "Steph," he whispered. She collapsed. She did not fall gracefully. She crumbled, hitting the concrete with a dull, wet thud. Tyrell dropped the gun. It clattered on the floor. He fell to his knees beside her. He put his hands over the wound, trying to stop the blood, but it was pouring out between his fingers. "Dad," he screamed, looking at me. "Dad, help her." I stopped 10 feet away. I looked at Stephanie, gasping on the floor. I looked at Tyrell, covered in her blood. I did not move to help. I did not rush to apply pressure. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote. The game was over. The tragedy was complete. I pressed the red button on the remote. Above us, in the darkness of the catwalks, the sound of tactical rappelling ropes zipping broke the silence. The shadows moved. The cavalry had arrived. But they were not here to save Stephanie. They were here to clean up the mess. The bullet that took Stephanie down did not stop there. It continued its trajectory, a hot, angry hornet of lead and copper tearing through the air. I felt the burn on my upper arm a split second after the muzzle flash. It sliced through the fabric of my jacket and grazed the flesh of my shoulder. It was a flesh wound, painful but not lethal, yet it was the catalyst that turned a domestic tragedy into a federal incident. I stumbled back, gripping my arm, feeling the warm wetness of blood seeping through my fingers. Tyrell dropped the gun and fell to his knees beside his bleeding wife, but the echo of the gunshot had barely faded when the warehouse ceased to be a dark, abandoned storage space. I pressed the button on the remote in my pocket. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. A bank of high-intensity halide floodlights slammed on from the ceiling grid 40 feet above us. The light was blinding, a physical force that washed out every shadow and turned the dusty concrete floor into a stage illuminated by the power of 1,000 suns. Tyrell screamed, covering his eyes, unable to look up. Stephanie gasped on the floor, clutching her stomach, her face pale and illuminated by the harsh glare. Then came the sound. It was not the wail of sirens. It was the synchronized thunder of heavy boots on steel catwalks. Ropes dropped from the darkness of the rafters, zipping down with the hiss of friction gear. Figures clad in full tactical black armor descended like spiders. They hit the floor with precision weapons, raised lasers cutting through the dust-filled air. They did not shout conflicting orders. They moved with the terrifying coordination of a Tier 1 asset protection team. "Secure the principal," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Neutralize the hostiles." 3 operators formed a phalanx around me, shielding my body with ballistic shields. I was the principal. I was the E. Tyrell and Stephanie were the hostiles. Tyrell looked up through his fingers, his eyes adjusting to the glare. He saw the red dots dancing on his chest. He saw the suppressed rifles pointed at his head. He saw the patches on the chests of the men rushing toward him. They did not say police. They did not say sheriff. The letters were bold and yellow, FBI. and next to them operators wearing the insignia of the Department of Homeland Security. Tyrell froze. His brain could not process the escalation. He had brought a street gun to a fight with the federal government. He looked at me through the gap in the shields. "Dad," he whimpered. "Who are these people?" "They are not cops, Tyrell," I said, my voice flat. "And you are not in a warehouse. You are in a classified black site." The reality of the situation crashed down on Tyrell as two agents grabbed him and slammed his face into the concrete. He was not being arrested for assault. He was being taken down as an enemy combatant. The warehouse was not empty. As the tactical team secured the perimeter, a section of the floor hissed and began to retract. Tyrell lifted his head from the ground, spitting blood and dust, to watch as a hydraulic lift rose from the sub-basement. It carried a large sealed server rack and a series of display cases containing prototype guidance chips. "You see that, Tyrell?" I asked, pointing to the rising machinery. "That is the guidance system for the next generation of intercontinental ballistic missile defense. That is what I built. That is what I protect." Tyrell stared at the machinery. It looked like science fiction, but it was the cold, hard steel of national defense. "You said you fixed radios," he whispered. "I lied," I said. "I was the director of system security for the Department of Defense contractors. This facility is a sensitive compartmented information facility. It houses intellectual property vital to the national security of the United States." A man in a suit walked into the circle of light. He flashed a badge that carried the weight of federal authority. "Special Agent Miller." He looked at Tyrell with disdain. "Mr. Barnes," he said, addressing Tyrell, "by entering this facility, unauthorized, carrying an illegal firearm and discharging said weapon in the presence of a high-value government asset, you have committed crimes that go far beyond attempted murder." Stephanie groaned on the floor as a medic applied a pressure bandage to her wound. She was alive, but she was entering a world of pain. What crimes, she rasped. "We just wanted the patents." "That is the problem," Agent Miller said, crouching down beside her. "Attempting to seize control of classified defense patents by force is not theft. It is not robbery. Under the Patriot Act and Title 18 of the United States Code, it is classified as an act of domestic terrorism and treason." "Treason." Tyrell shouted, his voice cracking. "We are Americans. We just wanted money." "Intent does not matter when you breach a federal black site," Miller said, standing up. "You attacked a senior advisor to the National Security Council. You fired a weapon inside a facility housing state secrets. You are not going to county jail, son. You are going to a federal supermax. You will be held without bail under the National Security Act." Tyrell looked at me. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had thought he was robbing a lonely old man. Instead, he had attacked a foundational pillar of the national defense grid. The magnitude of his mistake was so vast it was almost comical. "Dad, please," he begged. Tell them I did not know." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse, Tyrell," I said. "And ignorance of your father's true nature is your own fault. You never asked. You never cared. You just saw what you wanted to see. An old man, a victim." I turned to Agent Miller. "Process them," I said. "The principal is secure." The agents hauled Tyrell to his feet. He was weeping now, deep, racking sobs of a man who sees his life ending. They dragged him away, his feet dragging on the concrete. They lifted Stephanie onto a stretcher, handcuffing her wrists to the rails. She looked at me as they wheeled her past. Her eyes were glassy with shock and pain. "You are a monster," she whispered. I touched the bandage on my shoulder where her ambition had grazed me. "No, Stephanie," I said. "I am just a man who takes his job very seriously, and my job is to neutralize threats." I watched them go. The heavy steel doors of the warehouse rolled open to reveal a convoy of black SUVs and armored trucks waiting outside. They were loaded into separate vehicles. They would not see each other again for a very long time. I stood alone in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by the humming servers and the silent, deadly efficiency of the federal agents. My shoulder throbbed, but the pain was distant. The real pain was in my chest, a hollow ache where my hope for my son used to be. But as I looked at the machinery rising from the floor, the work of my life, the legacy I had actually built, I felt a strange sense of peace. The threat was neutralized. The leak was plugged. The system was secure. I walked toward the exit, leaving the ghosts of my family behind in the dust. I had a statement to write. and I had a new life to begin, one where I would never again have to hide who I really was. 6 months later, the federal district courthouse in Chicago was not a place of family drama. It was a cathedral of cold, hard consequence. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt designed to preserve evidence rather than comfort human beings. The walls were paneled in dark oak that seemed to absorb the light, leaving the room in a perpetual state of serious twilight. This was not a small claims court where ex-spouses argued over custody of a dog. This was where the United States government dismantled those who dared to threaten its security. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my shoulders still aching slightly when the weather turned. Beside me sat Special Agent Miller, who had traded his tactical gear for a suit that cost more than my old car. He did not look at me. He looked straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the empty jury box. The jury had not yet entered, but the tension in the room was palpable. It was the heavy static electricity that precedes a lightning strike. Tyrell and Stephanie were led in separately. They wore orange jumpsuits, not the tailored clothes they had worn to the warehouse. Their hands were shackled to their waists, and their ankles were chained together, forcing them to shuffle with small, humiliating steps. Tyrell looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 6 months. His hair was thinning, his skin was gray, and his eyes were empty craters. He did not look around. He stared at the table in front of him as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had dissolved. Stephanie, on the other hand, looked like a cornered animal. She scanned the room frantically, her eyes darting from the judge's bench to the prosecutor's table to me. When she saw me, her lip curled in a snarl, but she said nothing. Her lawyer, a public defender who looked exhausted before the proceedings even began, placed a hand on her arm to calm her. She shrugged it off violently. The judge entered. The Honorable Judge Holloway. She was a woman known for sentences that made grown men weep. She did not bang a gavel. She simply sat down and the room fell silent out of sheer respect and fear. The trial began not with arguments about feelings or misunderstandings, but with a brutal recitation of facts. The prosecutor laid out the case with surgical precision: the break-in at the secure apartment, the theft of the car, the forgery of the loan documents, and finally the armed assault on a classified facility. When it was time for the defense, Stephanie's strategy became clear immediately. She was not fighting the charges. She was fighting for survival by standing on Tyrell's neck. Her lawyer stood up and pointed a finger at Tyrell. "My client was a victim of coercion," he stated. "She was terrified of her husband. Mr. Barnes has a history of gambling addiction and association with violent criminals. He forced Mrs. Barnes to participate in these schemes under threat of physical harm. She did not want to be in that warehouse. She was dragged there. I watched Tyrell as his wife threw him to the wolves. He did not react. He did not shout objection. He simply closed his eyes. The man who had forged my name, who had pointed a gun at my chest, was finally seeing the woman he had destroyed his life for. He was seeing her without the filter of lust or desperation. He was seeing the predator beneath the skin." Stephanie took the stand. She cried on cue. She told a story of the abusive husband who controlled her every move. She claimed she begged him not to buy the gun. She claimed she tried to stop him from shooting me. She painted herself as a martyr, a saint trapped in a marriage with a monster. It was a compelling performance. But it crumbled when the prosecutor played the audio from the warehouse. The recording was crystal clear. Stephanie's voice echoed through the courtroom, shrill and demanding. "Sign the damn papers, Langston, or he will shoot you. Do it, Tyrell. Show him you are a man." The jury listened. They heard the venom. They heard the command. They heard her order her husband to kill his father. When the tape ended, Stephanie was silent. She looked at the jury and saw 12 faces hardened by disgust. Her lawyer put his head in his hands. Then it was Tyrell's turn. He declined to testify. He sat there mute, accepting his fate. He had nothing to say. His silence was not an admission of guilt. It was an admission of defeat. He had realized too late that the enemy was not the government, and it was not his father. It was the person sleeping next to him. I was called to the stand last. I walked up the aisle, feeling the eyes of the courtroom on my back. I swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Barnes," the prosecutor asked, "do you believe your son was coerced?" I looked at Tyrell. He looked up at me for the first time. His eyes were wet. "No," I said. My voice was steady. "Coercion implies a lack of choice. Tyrell had choices every step of the way. He chose to gamble. He chose to lie. He chose to steal. He chose to buy a gun. He chose to point it at me. But surely the defense lawyer interjected, trying to salvage something. You must see that he was influenced by his wife. He is your son. Do you not want leniency for him? I looked at the judge. I touched the scar on my shoulder through my shirt. Your Honor, I said, I spent 40 years building systems to protect this country. I taught my son right from wrong. I gave him every opportunity to be a good man. But he rejected those lessons. He chose greed over honor. He chose violence over work. He became a threat not just to me, but to the security of the nation. I paused. The room was silent. A father's job is to teach, I continued. Sometimes the lesson is love. Sometimes the lesson is protection. But today, the lesson is consequences. I did my job. Now I ask the court to do yours. I do not ask for mercy. I ask for justice. He made his bed. Let him sleep in it. Tyrell lowered his head. He understood. There would be no last-minute rescue, no check written to make the problem go away. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. It was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. When they returned, the foreman stood up. In the matter of the United States versus Stephanie Barnes on the charge of domestic terrorism, conspiracy to commit murder, and assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Stephanie screamed. It was a raw animal sound. She lunged at her lawyer, clawing at his face until the marshals tackled her. In the matter of the United States versus Tyrell Barnes, the foreman continued over the noise. We find the defendant guilty. The sentencing was immediate. Judge Holloway did not believe in delays. Stephanie Barnes, she said, looking down from the bench, you are a manipulator of the highest order. You orchestrated a campaign of terror against your own family. You showed no remorse, only self-preservation. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. Stephanie was dragged out, kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Tyrell, cursing the world. Tyrell Barnes, the judge said, turning her gaze to my son, you are a weak man. You allowed your vices and your wife to turn you into a criminal. But you also held the gun. You pulled the trigger. Weakness is not a defense. I sentence you to 15 years. Tyrell stood up. He let the marshals cuff him. He looked at me one last time before they led him away. He did not look angry. He looked relieved. For the first time in years, he knew exactly where his next meal was coming from. He was going to a place where he could not gamble, where he could not disappoint anyone, because no one expected anything from him. The heavy oak doors closed behind them. The courtroom began to empty. I sat in the witness box for a moment longer. It was over. The threat was neutralized. The file was closed. Agent Miller walked up to the railing. It is done, Director, he said. Yes, I said, standing up. It is done. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, cold sunlight of Chicago. The air tasted clean. I had lost a son, but I had regained my life. And for the first time in a long time, I did not have to look over my shoulder. 1 year later, the Pacific Ocean crashes against the cliffs below my new home in Malibu. It is not an apartment. It is a fortress of glass and white stone perched on the edge of the continent. The salt air is thick and clean. It smells of freedom. I stand in the garden wearing linen trousers and a loose shirt. The Chicago winter is a distant memory, a ghost that cannot haunt me here. I hold a brass watering can. It is old. It is the only thing I kept from the old life besides the photo of Viola. I am watering the rose bushes that line the perimeter of the terrace. They are hybrid teas, deep red and velvet soft. Viola loved roses. She used to say they were proof that beautiful things could protect themselves. Thorns are not aggression, she would say. Thorns are boundaries. I touch a petal. It is cool. The sun is setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. Below the cliffs, the waves churn. Behind me, the house hums. It is a symphony of silent technology. The windows are ballistic-grade polycarbonate. The perimeter is monitored by thermal imaging drones that patrol a 3-mile radius. The server room in the basement is cooled by liquid nitrogen and protected by a biometric lock that requires a heartbeat to open. I am not hiding anymore. I am living. But I am living on my own terms. The neighbors here do not ask questions. They are tech moguls and retired actors, people who value privacy as much as oxygen. They see an old black man tending his garden and they wave respectfully. They do not know who I was. They do not know what I did. They only know that I bought the property cash and that my security system scares their private security teams. The garden is peaceful. The only sound is the rhythmic splash of water hitting the soil. I move from bush to bush. I prune a dead leaf. I check for aphids. It is a simple task. It is a task that requires patience and care. Two things I wasted on the wrong people for too long. But the roses do not lie. They do not steal. They do not plot. If you feed them, they grow. If you neglect them, they die. It is an honest relationship. I finish watering and set the can down on the stone path. I wipe my hands on a cloth. I look out at the ocean. The horizon is a straight line dividing the world into water and sky. It is clean. It is absolute, just like the law. I walk back into the house. The glass doors slide open silently as I approach, sensing my proximity via the chip in my watch. The interior is cool and expansive. I walk to the kitchen island, which is made of a single slab of black marble. Sitting on the surface is a stack of documents. They are thick, bonded paper bound in leather folders. Beside the documents stands a man in a suit. It is Garrett. He flew in this morning on a private jet. He looks relaxed. He has traded his three-piece suit for a blazer and no tie. He is drinking an espresso. Is everything in order? I ask, walking to the counter. Garrett nods. He taps the folder. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. The trust is irrevocable. The board of directors has been vetted by the NSA per your request. The initial endowment is transferred and ready for disbursement. I open the folder. The first page reads the Viola Barnes Cybersecurity Scholarship Fund. $10 million, Garrett says. That is a lot of money, Langston. You could have bought a yacht. You could have bought an island. I pick up a heavy fountain pen. I do not want a yacht, Garrett. I want a legacy. I want to find the kids like me. The kids from the South Side who are smart enough to break codes but too poor to buy a computer. I want to give them a weapon. I want to teach them how to build walls, not just climb them. I sign my name at the bottom of the page. The ink flows black and permanent. This money will pay for tuition housing and top-secret clearance processing for 50 students a year, I say. It will change the face of the industry. It will put good people in the rooms where the decisions are made. Garrett takes the folder back. He closes it with a satisfying snap. Viola would be proud, he says softly. I look at the photo of Viola on the mantel. It is the same photo Stephanie threw on the floor. I had it restored. The crack in the glass is gone, but I know where it was. She would be, I say. She always wanted children. She just ended up with the wrong one. Garrett puts the folder in his briefcase. He knows not to push. He knows the wound is healed, but the scar tissue is still sensitive. There is one more thing, he says, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulls out a white envelope. It is standard institutional mail. The return address is a federal penitentiary in Indiana. The name on the corner is inmate number 89402B, Tyrell Barnes. It arrived at the office yesterday, Garrett says. I thought you should have it. I stare at the envelope. It looks small. It looks harmless. But I know it is a bomb. You do not have to read it, Garrett says. I can shred it. Leave it, I say. Garrett places the letter on the marble counter. He finishes his espresso. I will let you be, he says. The pilot is waiting. Enjoy the sunset, Langston. You earned it. He walks out. The door slides shut. I am alone with the letter. I pick up the envelope. The paper is cheap and rough. I walk to the living room where a gas fireplace flickers behind a sheet of glass. I sit in my armchair. I turn the envelope over in my hands. I have not spoken to Tyrell in a year. I did not visit him. I did not accept his calls. I tear open the flap. I pull out a single sheet of lined yellow paper. The handwriting is cramped and messy. It is the handwriting of a man writing on a bunk bed in the dark. Dad, it begins. I am sorry. I know that is not enough. I know I cannot fix what I broke. I have a lot of time to think in here. I think about Mom. I think about the bike you bought me. I think about the warehouse. I was weak, Dad. I was scared. I let her get in my head. I know I deserve this. I just wanted you to know that I am working in the library now. I am reading. I am trying to be the person you wanted me to be. I do not expect you to write back. I just wanted to say, I miss you. Love, Tyrell. I read the letter twice. My face does not move. My heart does not flutter. I feel a distant sadness like looking at a car crash on the news. It is tragic, but it is not happening to me. Not anymore. He is sorry because he is in a cage. He is sorry because the consequences caught up to him. If he were free, he would be trying to find this house. He would be trying to find a way in. I stand up and walk to the fireplace. I press a button on the wall and the glass panel slides down. The heat hits my face. It is real heat. I hold the letter over the flames. I watch the corner turn brown, then black, then curl into ash. The yellow paper catches fire. The words disappear. Dad, sorry, love, they all turn to smoke. I drop the burning paper into the fire. I watch it until it is nothing but gray dust. I close the glass. The smoke is sucked up the chimney away from me, away from my clean white house. I walk back to the kitchen and pour myself a glass of wine. It is a Pinot Noir, deep and complex. I walk out onto the terrace. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving a bruise of purple light on the water. The stars are coming out. I take a sip of the wine. It tastes of berries and earth. I think about Stephanie in her cell screaming at the walls. I think about Tyrell stamping books in a prison library. I think about the 50 kids who will get scholarships next year, who will build firewalls and protect secrets. I look at my reflection in the glass door. I see an old man, but I do not see a victim. I see a survivor. I see a warrior who won his last war. Peace comes at a very high price, I say to the ocean. The waves crash in agreement. It cost me a son. It cost me my history. It cost me the illusion of family. But I look at the security panel on the wall. All lights are green. The perimeter is secure. The drones are flying. The server is locked. At least tonight, I whisper, taking another sip. At least tonight, I do not need to lock my bedroom door. I turn my back on the dark ocean and walk into the light of my home. The glass door slides shut behind me, sealing out the cold, sealing out the past. I am safe. And that is enough. I learned that blood is biology, but family is a choice. For years, I allowed my son to weaponize my love against me, believing that a father's duty is to endure endless disrespect. I was wrong. The greatest act of self-preservation is realizing that you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Cutting the cord was painful, but it was necessary. Peace is not found in fixing broken people who refuse to change. It is found in building a life where you no longer have to lock your door against your own kin. If you believe in justice, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and consequence. Tell me in the comments, at what point would you draw the line with your own family?